Alright, put your phones away, close your laptop, Facebook accounts, and everything that might distract you from listening to what's going on in class. Please. Alright, since you guys are ready to talk about it, let's talk about it now. Today's schedule is one of those crazy things I do with post-it notes. Is we're going to review the last week's session. Yeah, again, like the week before, those 15, 20 slides to just put an emphasis on that material, to refresh your mind and say, hey, if I go back to those chapters and to my notes, this is the important stuff. Not all of, let's say, for this week's review, there are some hints, okay? Then we're going to dive in, after that, we're going to dive into planning and real estate law lecture. Those two chapters that have been actually in the beginning of the book and purposefully placed at the end of this session, or session block. Yeah? We're going to talk, we're mixing those, the public and the private, and then back again to the public interacting with the private property on ownership issues. Yeah? This is somewhat boring, but on the other side, also fascinating stuff. Yeah? If you like gossip, you will like that lecture. Why? Because every Supreme Court case presented in this class is like a gossip style thing about, hey, have you heard about this property management problem? Or, hey, they wanted to build this garage and they weren't allowed to. And therefore they ended up at the Supreme Court. United States Supreme Court. Yeah? And we're dealing with the study guide for the exam, which I plugged in earlier just to make sure that you guys are not going to go nuts completely about the expectations and the horror in an exam. Okay? So, this is posted on Canvas with the two sets of review slides from last week and today's review. Yeah? There are three major sessions we had, One is the residential land uses and the commercial land uses in the beginning. Yeah? Well, I call it week 1. Then week 2 was commercial land uses and real estate market dynamics. Remember we talked about urban form and urban models and the whole supply demand behind the whole ideas on how we trade goods and how that kind of demand and supply actually manifests into land value and land prices. Bid rent curve is one of the examples. All right, and then the legal session of today, that's the reason why I presented the study guide earlier. So we're going through the concept of zoning today. We're going to deal with takings, that's the end of the class. Yeah? We're going to have a Supreme Court case from 1926 called the City of Euclid versus Amber Realty. Yeah? Eminent domain is one of those main issues we're going to tackle with examples. And the book is very explicit in language about easements, zoning innovations, and then the CCRs. As private-based contracts between landowners and manifest that into the deed rather than between contract parties. All right? The format to jump ahead is going to be no notes, no books, no laptops, no additional any other help. It's handwritten. I'm old enough to read both cursive and printed. Yeah? If you read write illegible, that's fine. I can read them. I had a guy who recently wrote in an exam almost Greek letters, the whole thing, because he's even older than me. Yeah? Fine. If I can read it, I can grade it. So you don't have to write one letter a page size height of the page. Decent handwriting. If you read my handwriting, you will complain about my handwriting. I can read my handwriting, so I can read your medical doctor's handwriting most of the time. So calm down and breathe. No panic. It's like handwritten exams. There's no multiple choice, no true, false, yes, no to answer. The bare minimum would be, hey, do you agree and why? And you say, no, that, and this is why I don't agree. That would be my version of true-false. Yeah? In terms of timing, enough time to clear handwriting and etc. Yeah? Current setup is about 4 questions. Indifferent between 3 and 4. Also depends how far and how happy we are with the legal stuff. Okay? If it's going to be 4 questions, you can expect 2 longer answers and 2 short answers. What I mean with longer, a typical exam format, I would have one with me, would be a page like this. Top paragraph is the question. This is the space you have to answer. If not, the back side. I'm doing this format since decades. It works. You don't have to write 20 pages. No? Precise, concise. Don't make blah 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 fillers. If you get a full page of space to answer, I would expect a bunch of sentences, not just one. Even if it said, give me a definition in your own words. You might want to add 1 or 2 sentences, what do you mean with that one other definition? Yeah? Let's say, what is real estate's principles? Not coming in the exam. Yeah? You would say, my understanding of real estate principles is the following. And you give me 1 sentence. And then you say, hey, the next 2 or 3 sentences, and this is what I mean with that. Just to foster and support your statement. Yeah? You don't have to write a whole book. Don't write a whole book. Yeah? Why I'm telling you this? Well, in the top of that study guide, it tells you what I recommend. Take a look at the questions. Go print this out. Don't do it on a laptop with Windows back and forth. Print this 1 page out, put it next to you, and then start scribbling ideas about it. Or copy and paste this in the Word document. And do like half-page paragraphs for each of the questions. And start maybe thinking about what could be your perfect answer for that. That's a system I use for my comprehensive exam, my geography credit programs back in Germany. Our test was 4 hours long with 1 question to answer. And you had to practice how to handwrite this and set this up. Yeah? What you also see here, depending on scope of a question, you should assume 15 to 20 minutes as test time per question. That means if you read one, gives you enough time to think about the idea, what does he mean with this? That's the reason why I give you these kind of sample questions. Okay? So you have an idea, how will I ask you something about mixed use? Give in your own words a definition of mixed use. Yeah? Shouldn't be that problematic if you did the readings and consider what you did in lectures. Yeah? And you explain it in your own words, and you will probably end up with 5 to 10 sentences. That's kind of the scope I'm looking for. Yeah? Again, don't write 1,000 words per answer. You're doing this handwritten. So think smart and be smart. Yeah? What really works for me and my students in other classes is if you write down 3 or 4 buzzwords, keywords you need to answer or have as elements in the answer. And then you write sentences and go like a roadmap through those keywords. Why? Because if you for some reason get nervous at some point of time in your exam, if you have those keywords there, they calm you down, they are like milestones and anchors to plot your course through the answer. We have 2 hours time for the exam. You should plan on 15 to 20 minutes in your practicing. That means if we have 4 questions, you have 30 minutes per question, full exam time. So there's already some buffer in there. Again, everyone's like, panic, don't. The way I test when I do written exams is I want your comprehensive knowledge to this topic. I don't care if there's a margin error in some of those concepts. of 8.87%. You need to state that there might be the potential of margin errors that will have a problem with that calculation. We don't do calculations, but I try to give you that example. Okay? These are all fair. If you look at the chapters, this is like following like the field map of items we had in the chapters. And you can see this is a little bit far away in the past versus this is the stuff we're doing today. So there's certain trade-offs in terms of the in-depth scenario for the applications. Okay. This is posted on Canvas, straightforward, not really a problem. That's the way I like to test my students, basically saying, okay, fine, think about a definition, think about how to explain this, have an example, because you always have to refer to the real world with some examples in your business. Yes, please.
For this, is this just like examples of what you can ask, or is this the content that your test is on?
Well, the content is the last 3 sessions, including today.
Okay, so it's like...
And the 6 chapters in the textbook. And what we discussed in class. And you can see this is 3 sessions. This is week 1, week 2, and week 3. And those are sample questions how I would ask.
Okay, so it's
Tuesday night, 6 till 8 p.m. I think it's this room, is it? Should be. If not, I will notify you via email. To answer your question, I usually give one word-by-word question from the study guide in the exam. And it's shocking if you give all questions from the study guide and you get bad results. So it works both ways.
But you will give exact questions?
I give one exact question from the study guide in the exam.
And the other ones will be very
They are going to be in the same pattern. Okay? Oh, relax. I'm not the enemy, okay? It's amazing the level of stress. I understand tests are terrible. It's important to be successful in tests, okay? But the nature of talking about, let's say, zoning and the legal issues of zoning, there are different ways to test. One would be a law book, and you have to cite from the law book, or you are able to state the general concepts out of your memory. Huh? Yes, please.
Is each question 25?
Don't know yet. Don't know yet. What I usually do is, in credit level classes, what I usually do, and I'm not sure yet if I do this here, I'll probably do the same way. What I do in the credit level classes, if I give like a similar concept, I give them 2 questions they must answer. I give like 15 points per question. For our definition and then discussion part. I don't want an in-depth discussion here. Yeah? Because there are different levels of achievements between class levels. Yeah? So if you're here in a graduate level, that grad student needs to discuss a proper definition, pro and cons with 2 or 3 examples. Here it would be, give me your own words of this, of that definition, what do you mean with that? Give me an example, and maybe elaborate a little bit in between more. As in, give me some foundation for your definition of your own words. There are different levels of digging out the knowledge. Then in the graduate classes, what I will also do is, I give them 2 to pick 1, or 3 to pick 2. Because we're covering a lot of topics, and let's say, in the legal world, if you don't like eminent domain, but you're really top on the zoning innovations, I give, let's say, an eminent domain and a zoning innovations question to cover the legal world. And whatever you prefer, you would answer it, if you would be one of my grad students. Yeah? I'm not there yet, because I designed the study guide questions and I'm looking at them and say, okay, fine, how in depth is this scope? And then honor that in points. But typically you get 15-point questions and 10-point questions. So have not figured out, because I'm bouncing between 3 and 4 questions, because some of those are very short and rewarding, and some of them you need to write a little bit more, and I tend to give, the more you have to write, the more points I should be able to give you, because you have to cover more content to get to the whole picture. Yeah? So if you look at, let's say, legal session, you can write 15 pages for the concept of zoning, and I might ask just half a page. Yeah? So we got to go through that. All right? Again, this is going to be okay. Alright, so what did we do last week?
Talk about hotels.
We talked about hotels, yeah.
Locations of places, I guess.
Location theory stuff, yeah. What else?
Filter.
What do you mean filter?
I don't remember exactly.
Alright. Anyone wants to help out? When we drop filter or filtering in the context of the real estate principles class, dealing with commercial land users, what does ring the bell for you? Any idea? Yes, please.
Filter out. So like you got class A, class B, class C.
Alright.
Style buildings. And sometimes businesses have to start out at class C because they don't have as much capital. So then they start there, which is lower income, and then they can move up to B and eventually A.
Close, good, but not there yet. Yeah. So when you talk about office spaces, we have different typologies of office spaces. The book has A, B, C, and D class. Typically we talk about A, B, and C, where C is the lower grade, older stock. Yeah, not fiber to the desk, maybe still DSL dial-up or something. Yeah. Not in premium location, definitely cheaper in rent. Yeah. So the example we had in class and discussed was, if you are too big for your mom's garage with your company because your 2 high school friends need replacement with a computer engineer, yeah, you need some office space. If you're still living at your mom's, you might have an issue to find $1 million investment, so therefore the office space that costs you only a few $1,000s a year will do in the halfway abandoned mall or the old office complex around the corner. That would be a class C or even D. He described this the right way. That filtering process is rather a filtering up, not a trickling down. Yeah. And then if you grow with a company based on the business cycle, grow with the company, hire more employees, you grow with the size and office space needs, therefore you will do what? You will find something new and you will move. Huh? And then, after a year, 2 years, or 5 or 10, you're again too small for the space you have. You start moving again. And that process we call filtering. Alright. So if you look at that curve here, distance from regional centers, rent per acre. What does that picture trigger from last week?
We also, I don't know, this isn't it, but like we did the graphs that are like the circle, like the radiuses.
Yeah. We did that. What else? We did that, which are on some page in the book. We also did, remember that graph we did with the circles?
Yes.
Do it on the back. It's not on the camera, but you can find that. It's the big so-called bid rent curve. And prior to that, it was the concentric ring theory by, or transportation rings by von Thünen. So you did this graph, and we had specific land uses with different utilities, yeah, and where you change these, actually, we need to take this one. Where you change these, you could say, okay, fine, here my rent will change, and I can draw these different circles. And this could be, let's say, an office in the CBD area, etc., and more in suburbia, because this is distance and this is price.
And that's
Okay?
used to find, you said rent?
Bid rent curve. That's the password you need to look at. Page 286.
But when you do that, what do you solve? Like, what's the point of using that?
If you're close to the center or in the center, you can expect extremely high rents per acre or per square foot. Yeah? Then you can see here offices. They cut off that curve. That curve would go down here, that line. Yeah? Manufacturing, that line would go down here. I drew them down to the x-axis. Yeah? See that? They're all going extensions. They would hit at some point. But to make this easier, my dotted line over there is one of these. So you could draw now circles as well. I'm
Just
saying
to visualize it better.
different visualization, because you end up with what? If you have one location and you draw these circles, if you have one distance point, you draw it as a circle, or you draw it around it, you will have a circle. Yeah? That means in specific distances from my center, I have different levels of rent to expect. That's the reason why you pay, let's say, to make this up, $25 per square foot in downtown versus, let's say, $18 right around the corner here. Yeah? Because proximity and density drives the market in this case, in the classic view of a bid rent curve. Yeah? A car dealership in downtown is probably a small window front with 2 Teslas in it. Or Maserati. I don't see a Hyundai car dealership in downtown because of the massive space in it. Yeah? So, the example here is you have peaks at a certain specific distance, yeah, with the blue line, arrows here. And those peaks signal that at a local level, you have a change in those market prices. You suddenly end up around this, let's say, the Sawgrass Mill, around the mall, have a surge on prices. Why? Because you create a subcenter in the regional landscape. All right? So the drawing on the back is the classic standard explanation. This one adds regional subcenters. That's the reason also, if you look then later in how urban space is developed. Do I have this graphic there still? No. We talked about metro cores and over time where they developed, like coming from the inner city, out CBD, and then more regional and far, far out. In our case, we are limited with the far, far out, with the Everglades. But if you remember, let's say downtown Miami, market getting more and more intense, prices are going up. Candle, green space, cheap land to buy, why not to drop something we call an edge city in Candle and have a massive amount of office space there? Because transportation, nobody cares about an hour commute somewhere. This is a phenomenon when we have a discussion about your daily commutes. Or if you ask your friends how far they commute for their jobs or for school. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, actually it's devastating. I do that exercise in one of my credit classes. And population is different, 25 till 40 years. And they're all over the map. Run to the grocery, 20 minutes drive, instead of around the corner. It's insane. And it's not a Whole Foods groceries, the regular groceries. I really want to know where they live. All right, so keep that in mind. There's some economic theory. This is, I think, chapter number 14, market dynamics. Yeah? as an economic theory we can use to explain why location matters and why location is more attractive than other places. Yeah? Why is the CBD still so attractive if everything is super, super expensive here in land rent? Price you have to drop to build or rent as a tenant versus in suburbia. Because yeah, you are in downtown. Yeah? You're not in a suburban office block at the second floor in suite number 205. That's as big as this room. No, you own the building in downtown and you have your law division library is in the penthouse, 3 floors high. It's a difference. You could also say I don't really care. I'm just staying outside in suburbia because I really like the idea of having a park next to my workspace. So keep that in mind. Location choices are driven by different factors. The bid rent curve is one of the explanations as a model we can give. Okay? What are other factors? Well, we talked a little bit about that. Other factors for office space. How it changes over time. Would you buy a building with 10,000 square foot? If you're just moving out of your garage? If you're Uber, yeah. If you're just writing a smartphone app, probably not. Yeah? And we had a fun discussion here about flexible floor plans and then office flex, for which we pulled out an example from Miami. And we had one example here from downtown Fort Lauderdale. I think it was called Access. All right? Again, you can go back, check the video, etc. Everyone knows, by the way, I got an email from a student. Everyone knows about our videos on the YouTube channel? Everyone? Like, can I have a really definitely nod that you are aware of that we have the videos posted so you can go back and double check my lectures? Okay, fine. You're surprised, that's exam week. Some people will forget that there's something out there. Alright, and here we go. This is actually the example I referred to if this would be downtown Fort Lauderdale. This is 595 and hitting the Everglades. Yeah? So somehow the symbol in this area here out there we would consider now, let's say, Weston and Sunrise. Yeah? And you can explain with Leinberger's network course how this works. Please note, Leinberger is a special input for this class to give you an idea of economics and space. I think Leinberger was not in the textbook. So pretty sure I'm not going to ask about Leinberger because it's not really noted in the textbook. Bit-rent curve, you have that diagram in the book. So we're going to take a look at that maybe. Alright, then from the spatial manifest we talked about what? Market areas. How a market area, because it's a recurring problem. We have different market areas for residential uses, for commercial uses, aka let's say office or retail. This was the checkup on office. So if we want to double check on office space, we need to figure out what's the demand for office space, and I gave you a small example that if you have X amount of new employees coming for office use, you can argue that they need X amount of square foot. Therefore, you could multiply that and get like the net demand for this. Again, this is about the general concept. This is not about writing down an equation and calculating that. I'm not going to ask you to calculate this example. The general idea is, if you're able to know what's coming as new employment that needs office space, based on current inventory and current standards in office size, like how much space do you need for a cubicle as an example, you could consider mathematical solutions to the floor space you need in the market. No? Because you don't ask how many buildings are in the market, now you ask what's the square footage available in the market. And they usually come with specific sizes along. Okay? Then you went into industrial space. Any idea about industrial? 1 or 2 examples? Warehouse, what else? Distribution center is kind of warehousing, still. Manufacturing is industrial. What else? Farms. Like a dairy farm or apples? No, that would be agricultural. Even if they're industrialized, they're more agricultural. No, the hardcore industrial, like heavy industry, chemical plants. Like a chemical plant that does all the fertilizers for you, as an example, or paint for your house, which we don't really have much here in the area. It's a little bit too environmentally sensitive. Alright, so we did look at more likely at warehousing. Because when we talk about real estate and real estate principles and the idea of also property management, warehousing is really hot. Yeah? Because it's like the ugly stepchild or the ugly duckling and turns into like this premium thing. Alright, so we should take a look at some freight modeling, freight modeling. We talked about the logistics behind that. The example here with government incentives was like big major manufacturing plants, like big examples as Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, BMW. They're all in specific areas. If you do a little bit of the homework and just for the fun and take a look at where are they located, that is not in downtown Miami. They need lots of land, flat, because they can't really go 2 or 3 floors high because of the construction costs. It makes the plant more expensive. And they need good connections in regional and cross-country transportation, and they have a massive delivery system to back them up. The concept, what we call just-in-time, came from the Japanese automobile industry. One of those concepts with that. Why? Because they made clear that you need to deliver on time, in time. The moment this part of the car is used, it should be at the station. And one of the things you can do with that is also you reduce inventory that sits in your warehouse. Yeah? So asking pricing, logistics, realistic long-term pricing, logistics, etc. If my products are in a truck, being out to get delivered, they're still in my inventory, but they're moving. So there's also a question about the sizing and the logistics of a warehouse. Yeah? Do you need 100,000 square foot? Yeah? Or do you need 200,000 square foot because you have really bad lag time in between and shift modes, aka comes in one way, you have to repack and goes out the other way. Yeah? So you gotta keep that in mind a little bit. All right. Well, let's take a look more at warehousing and industrial land uses. The idea is as well that if you look at today's session, you don't have to write this as a land use necessarily purely warehousing. You could say it's research and development that allows for a barrage of land uses. As a city or a small town, you want to have the ability to attract new customers to come to your city. Yeah? And if you have like 300 or 400 acres available and you sold them as a, let's say, a research and development park, you can create something where you can say, hey, you could do some warehousing here if traffic impact studies, etc. allow that, but you also can do some manufacturing and other uses that would be not necessarily great to have in a downtown or in a residential area. Which comes back later to hotels, because in hotels and mixed use we talk about the synergies of land uses when we combine them. A hotel next to a convention center is a good mix. A single family home division of 100 and 200 units right next to a convention center might not be the best way. Could be worse. Could be a black asphalt top manufacturing plant that smells all day long like boiling oils. So you don't want to have that. You don't want to have the hardcore industrial use right next to your more family-friendly use. But there are different gradations in between, gradients in between. So if you talk about synergies, not all land uses are perfect next to each other, some are more. Office and residential? Yeah. It's a downtown area. Why not? You can stack it in the same building. a few floors of retail and office and put apartments and condos on top. Condo users are not bothered by that. They're 8th floor or higher. You know? They don't want to be in the 3rd floor and just look out across the street into the next window row. They want to have a little bit of view. You know, you pay for that view. All right. So, again, here warehousing. The idea is, again, what kind of building types you have, what kind of ownership you have. Do you own the warehouse? Do you rent it over a few years? Yeah. And we had a discussion about the Walmart regional distribution centers and how they're strategically placed at locations with high traffic nodes. As in here, close to the port and close to major intersections and traffic access. Yeah. Same thing here, in strategic distances to each other. Yeah? You almost can measure that. It feels like they're about the same. Yeah? Well, this is a little bit different here, Carla, because these guys are definitely serving Tallahassee and going up to, not just down to the Ocala and the Tampa Bay area. All right? So again, a simple Google Map search can help you to make you too much coffee this morning. Makes you help to understand the spatial context. Goes back to this little sketch. Where are you locating this warehouse? Is it downtown? No, too much rent to pay. Typical price here is, I think, between $650 and $725 per square foot. But think about it. You're renting $100,000 or $200,000 and you're paying upfront a year or 2 years. With other conditions as well. So it's not like you're room and board for college or your rent you do with your roommates. Yeah? Different dimensions, different scale. All right. Something also to remember is maybe the warehouse logistics. What kind of sizing we're actually looking for here. Yeah? Again, if you look at site accessibility, consider the factors. I have large trucks. I have a lot of large trucks. Where can they come in? Where they come from? Can I have a staging area where they park shortly, or am I not allowing them to park at all? The example is Walmart. Walmart is so coordinated that they have barely lag time to be actually sitting there and waiting and parking. Technically, the travelers are getting actually penalized for being early. Just in time is good enough. If you're late, you get penalized. But just in time is good enough. Yeah? So think about that. Your personal experience is flying. You're not complaining about if the plane is leaving 5 minutes, but you're a little bit surprised. The only reason why it leaves 10 or 15 minutes early is because everyone is on board. But a typical rule of thumb is there's always some delay. Yeah, because there's something technical issues or people are still missing, etc. They changed it a little bit, but it's fine. And warehouse logistics, the book gives you some ideas about this more in depth. Building heights, we talked about that. We presented this example from Duke Realty. We did have a visit in one of those logistics at Milk, Miami Industrial Logistics Center. They stayed here. This is higher than usual. Now they stayed 32. 29, 30 is typical. Those 2 or 3 feet more in height is a competitive advantage for them in the market right now. And the fact that they're able still to find sites to build that big. Broward County and Miami-Dade soon too as a limited land market. Demand and supply. Limited land market means I am going to have issues to find 5 acres and larger zoned for industrial. So I can't build 1 million square foot on 5 acres. You're looking at warehousing, like the small warehouse here on College Avenue and College and Nova. If you go north on the left side, still vacant right now, beautiful little warehouse. But you need a lot of small little ones compared to this one big one we had in our session. So there's an issue between 255 here or 1 million plus. All right? All right, then we went to hotels. Someone remembered hotels. Would you like to elaborate about hotels? All right. So, the market is segmented by price, location, amenities, and services plus niche product. What do we mean with this? Can you give an example? What are different types? How can we differentiate hotels?
By location.
By location. What do you mean with by location? Give me an example. A good one and a bad one for location.
The W in Bristol and the Best Western in Davie. So,
Yep. Different locations, different ranks, different brands. Yeah? How much do you pay at a W in Dripple?
couple $100.
Couple $100 a night for a small single bedroom twin size probably. If you're lucky you get a queen. Yeah? How much do you pay for the other one for in Davie?
Probably
Probably just
$30-$40.
it's probably 100. The hotel market is surprisingly high. Yeah. But you get the image. Yeah? I had the Bates Motel from the movie. Yeah? As an example. They pretty much pay nothing there. Yeah? But real life. But again, there's a difference in hotels, in the ranks in a hotel, and the price and the service you have to pay for that. Services and the price you have to pay for that. Okay? Location, location, location. Same hotel, right at the beach. Same hotel, right at the airport. Different price probably, huh? Yeah, different, same hotel brand. Apparently based on location. Alright, what do we mean with niche products?
Star Wars Hotel.
A theme-based hotel, yeah.
Different amenities.
Different amenities. So if you're a Star Trek person, you will not go to that specific hotel. Hard Rock Hotel was a theme-based. Kind of a niche back then. What else? What about bed and breakfast? Are those niches in the hotel business? Yeah? What about boutique hotels? Like high-end resort, super expensive, and you literally get pampered every day just walking across the hallway there with like 4 or 5 people helping you.
So it'd be like all-inclusive hotels, like you pay one fee.
Yep.
You eat on the
Yep, but you drop probably half of your annual salary
Yeah.
for that.
Not in
Our annual salary. Yeah?
Not
So,
in Not in Punta Cana.
what?
Not in Punta Cana. The Dominican Republic. It's cheap.
No, it's not. Did you ever stay at the Hard Rock there? It's not cheap.
Alright, simple example. What do you expect for hotel price in Key West?
A couple $100.
Who has been to Key West yet in their college life here? Alright, did you do a day trip or did you stay overnight? Day trip. Why did you do a day trip?
We went on a cruise.
Alright, you went to Mallory Square, hopped on a boat there, and had one day walking around, and at 5 o'clock you took off.
Exactly.
Alright,
There's nothing to do there for a couple of days.
what's the other effect on Key West? It's a different way to chill down there. Alright, but why did you do a day trip?
Because there's nothing to do for a couple of days there. You can do anything, everything in 1 day.
I disagree with that, but I'm trying to get you in a different direction. What would be a good reason not to stay multiple days down there?
Because
It's expensive.
Because as a college student, you might not be able to afford that hotel room. What are you going to do to make that hotel room happen? You split it with a bunch of friends. You come in, have 1, 2 queen bed sizes or something like this, and sleep 6 people in a $300 hotel room. Or 400 or 500, depending again which brand you're using. And in Key West, it's also the indicator if you look at that, if you're in Old Town versus New Town, or even a little bit up off the island. Yeah? If you're closer to the airport, prices are somewhat cheaper. Somewhat. Like $80 cheaper. But if you look at Whitman, Duval Street, all these major streets there, everything there is outrageously priced compared to, let's see, here or somewhere else. 3 days in New York with flying over there is cheaper, I would say, than staying 3 days in Key West if you don't like to share your room with 7 people. Alright? So if we talk about hotels, in the review. You gotta keep that in mind. Price, location, amenities and services make a huge difference for that hotel and you as a potential customer. If you can't afford the 5-star hotel for $500, and you're price sensitive, you might look for a motel in the $100, $150 range. Or, if available, you go to secondary markets, Airbnb, couch surfing. Okay? Why? Because in Airbnb, you're closer, let's say, to a family or a bunch of other people, closer in your age group maybe. Yeah? Versus $500 hotel, kind of lonely in a big room. Yeah? Alright. Back to the basics. We did not go into depth about the average daily rate or the revenue generation of a hotel. Yeah? So we roughly can skip that. But you have to remember location is a factor. Yeah? And its performance depends on the regional market. If you're close to an airport, it depends how much people are going through that airport. It also depends what type of people are going through the airport. If the folks in Miami are just flying in the morning or hopping into a shuttle bus or a cab and going to the port to hop on a cruise, that's different from, and then come back, do the same thing, and have very little duration at the airport, if not at all an overnight stay, 0, because the cruise boats are timed perfectly in sync with the flight schedules. Then you don't need to stay in a hotel. Unless you fly somewhere exotic, your cruise starts on the exotic place at 8 o'clock in the morning and you will never make it on time of the flight. So you fly in the day before and you stay in a cheaper place. That's when you do the exotic stuff. But again, keep in mind, the regional market does not just say it's the location, it's what comes through too. That's the reason why with the location and a highway versus an airport versus the cozy Appalachian valleys with some bed and breakfast is a different market. Alright. Hotels are revenue generators. They have employment. They need food and other things from the region. So you have to make sure that your hotels are running because you might be a caterer toward that hotel. You deliver every day some 60 to 100 lettuce heads. Farm to table. Interesting concept. Alright. We did talk about that a little bit with synergies between land users. Some of them really work well with each other. I think I took that out. That's diagram with the points how well they compose with each other. But it's important to remember that you can state that there are synergies between land users. Some work very well. Residential of all types work well with each other. Residential and some retail works well. Your Publix is a retail shop. Nobody complains that there's a Publix in the neighborhood. You would complain if there's some other crazy retail like 5 super Walmarts because of the traffic impact. It's different. So, then you have hotels close by, depending where you're at the location of the region. And entertainment is an interesting part because entertainment and sports, it's great to have a football team in the region, it's great to have a good hockey team in the region, but do you want to live just across the street from those stadiums? Not really. Why not? Traffic and what else? Noise. What else? What type of noise?
Could be a lot of vehicles or stuff,
People, fireworks.
concerts.
Yeah, so different noise, traffic-based, event-based. Could be light. It's really great to have a local baseball field next to you just across the street. It's really wonderful. Yeah, during the day it's quiet. On the weekends and the evenings, all that light. You can drop your energy bill a lot. Why? Because you don't have to switch on lights in your house because the lights from the field are bright. It's not a joke. I actually have friends that had that effect. I was like, oh yeah, sit on your porch, don't have candles or lights out on the porch because across the street is Little League baseball, meetup groups, baseballs, and softball teams. Alright. Further, in hotels, you can differentiate them. Again, we have services, we have price, we have locations, so there's just a little bit more detail. All this form as boutique hotels. We had a discussion about Airbnb as well, remember? Huh? Can go through. Always keep that in mind. Okay, fine, price. We had the discussion today again. Ownership. We didn't really talk about timeshares. So hint, 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 hint. It's probably not going to be on the exam, but it's an important concept you have to remember. Why?
Because some of them will offer a timeshare eventually.
Yes and no. You are in what kind of class right now?
Property management.
Why would be a timeshare important for property management?
To get them timeshares.
Maybe, but that's your your marketing department. But
I said I don't want to be that guy.
if it's a timeshare, you have not just one owner, you have multiple owners that are bought in as shareholders on a timeshare. So you have now 10 people over the year you have to amuse and service as the property manager. Think about that. Instead of one person in a condo as an owner or a family owning a condo, now you have 10 people from across the globe, if not just in the US. Depending where you're at, that could be stressful, that could be a lot of fun. Yeah. I have friends who have timeshares in Las Vegas. I'm like, why do you have a timeshare in Las Vegas? Well, it's Vegas. Just for 1 or 2 weeks a year. 2 weeks excess a year. You got to lock that in advance, half year in advance. And depending on the seasons, you have better chances or not. So, interesting concept. Time sharing or fractional ownerships. Got to keep that in mind. And it's not a bad market for a property manager. You learn a lot in that sector. Because it's different from a hotel. Hotel, you have short-term guests taking care of your inventory, or long-term, like the extended stay, so rent it out for 2 months. So you can build a relationship even with those long-term renters, or extended stay folks. With timeshares and fractional ownerships, could be an interesting market to start your career, and then come back to a higher-end volume as well. Yeah? All right. We talked a little bit about issues, and I think that's it. No, we talked about markets. Just how are you doing? Oh, perfect. All right. So, when you look at the market dynamics chapter, the economics, did you just pop open your CD drive? How dare you? If you look at the different mechanisms here, it starts with demand and supply. The basics of microeconomics and depends how you shift your demand versus your supply curve. Yeah? From Lauderdale is a named example in the book. For the larger understanding of the demand and supply functions in the market, I urge you to read that chapter again. Yeah? Because later in that chapter it goes into market demands, specific functions. Bid rent curve is one. Beautiful graphics there. I showed you the original 1924, I think it was, 1940s, early 19th. Yeah? Von Thünen adapted then into modern economic theory in explaining the so-called bid rent curve. The bid rent curve and those concentric rings, as Stacy pointed out, will help to understand here demand and supply. Okay? Certain price, certain demand, quantity available. We have a specific price available here. We can have specific shifts. We didn't do an in-depth explanation what happens if you shift this way or the other curves. We didn't do that. Hint, hint, hint. You need a comprehensive understanding, but you don't need that detail. Which specific curve, when, what effects. Huh? Hello? I knew I had it with me. This is the Von Thünen model, based on before refrigeration. Yeah? Distance from the center, far, far, far out, different land uses and their utility expressed in economic rent. Yeah? And again, whenever a curve, even if it's a line, we call it a curve, is crossing here, residential versus dairy, here at that corner, and draw a dashed line down there. This is your starting point for that boundary for residential, moving into dairy, until the next one crosses here again, and you can't draw that. Why? Because you're standing here, you have that specific distance, and you just turn around 360 degrees. You get that hypothetical circle. If transportation stays the same. If there's a river, if there's a railroad track, or even an ocean, that will change. We didn't discuss that. But we discussed this, and just in basic graphics, you can see if we determine here the idea of office pricing, and compare it for retail versus office versus residential, you can see you get the same concept. When you cross here the curves, you're creating these circles. Alright? A little sketch over there, two sketches here. Alright, what does this mean? Well, if I have a magnet site, like a mall, like a big shopping center, or a massive destination, let's say a Walt Disney, I have close by other land users, but I have to pay certain prices. Why do you pay $300 for a hotel a night at Universal Studio for a Universal Studio hotel? Why would you pay like a $300? Was range $150 to $350. Why?
Because it's the closest hotel.
Because it's the closest hotel. Because if you pay, let's say, for the Hard Rock, I think you're in the park. You're not leaving the park. You can take the water taxi, and you're in there. Yeah. You're right here at the magnet site. The $60 or $80 thing is right here, and then you have something else far, far away. If you take a hotel here, you might not have a shuttle bus for free. You might actually have to drive here and park and pay. If you're closer here, you might have other amenities and other services available. You pay for it. You pay $350 for any of those big hotels. You also get for everyone in the room a fast express pass, which is like $80 usually a day, I think. Because you pay premium hotel, they give you that as a treat. It's really great if you're like literally 4 people. You get savings of hundreds of dollars for the expensive hotel. And if you call them, this is an experience you have to do, even if you don't really go there. Just check the web page, regular prices, Florida resident prices. For those who are from other different states, get a Florida driving license. 1 day at Universal pays for all that fun. It's cheaper. But it is a pricing demand model they are going to put up. So you call them up and say, I want to be there 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, depending on what kind of park pass you have and the hotel you want to book. You have 20 different options and you get completely lost. You literally have to call them 3 times and write this down. You've got to spend a whole day doing homeworks if you're price sensitive. But you also learn, but this is the price, I get all these goodies in there. This is the lower price, I don't get all the goodies in there. It's a crazy system of bundles and incentives. For the Shark Cage people, we're always talking about subscription. We're always talking about bundles. At least I try to convince you that this is a good concept. Think about that. Magnet side, location here, an example of a Universal Studio Park, create with the bundles. If this is the mall, not so sure what else would you bundle here. There's a Best Buy next door or a Home Depot next door. So the bundle effect doesn't exist, but the attractiveness of the so-called magnet side is for sure. Can you imagine something about next to IKEA? As like a need for a second stop, like you go to IKEA, what else would you need? Maybe food, if you don't like the Swedish food that's offered there. So IKEA falls out a little bit here in this one as an example, because it doesn't really have that kind of competition in the market. All right? So, if we adopt the bit rent curve into space, And take a look at how urban growth occurred over time. You can see exactly this Bidrand curve thing displayed here in a concentric growth model. Depending on topography and transportation, this is not going to work always. That's the reason why I ended up maybe with something like this. That's the Hallman multinuclei model from 47 or 54, 47 I think. You don't need to know the numbers, but you need to understand that there's an idea between the different explanation how urban space will grow like this versus like this. This, remember the curve with the red lines in the beginning? This explains why you suddenly have a subcenter here. Number 7, outlying business district. Yeah? If you flip this, this is your Miami, ocean here. This is your Miami, this is your Candle. That's the Everglades, if you would flip that, mirror it. All right? Text messages are really fun tonight, aren't they?
I'm actually not interested.
All right, fine. All right, all of that ends into the discussion we had about what is urban form. And I know some of you personally right now in their life stages, they are, let's say, living in the dorms on campus. A 40-minute commute with a car to a major employment center does not work, as an example. But think about this. It does rain outside, and you're thinking to walk from the dorms to the student union building to get food, or to go to the gym, or go and walk to this building to be on time for class. There are different incentives to do that kind of travel. Food and class will win over gym, I'm pretty sure. You might, if it's really, really thunderstorming out, you might skip the gym or make it short, wait out, make it a shorter gym trip. Instead of the hours, you might do just 20 minutes. Or none. Can happen. So again, different life stages, different preferences, different desires to do activities. Not every one of you travels every day 40 minutes to work. Because by the nature of you being a full-time student, you are busy all day long studying. No? But sit less. Okay. It's like, yeah, study.
No.
But think about that. The desires and the travel needs during a day, during a week, or during a month, or during a season are determining all of this, how we line up in space. And over the years, this might have changed or will change again. If I don't have to use my personal car every day to get to work, I hop on a bus. If the bus is very convenient, if I can do my work on the bus. In some areas, in some cities, it's not very pleasant to ride the bus. It's always jammed, always packed. Some people say it will smell. Some people say they harass you when you're sitting there, depending on which city you live. Not really a discussion when you're in, let's say, DC. You hop on the metro. You don't, as a tourist, you don't have that. Metro New York, depending on the daytime, different story. Places I used to live with, metro bus systems. Personal car and parking might have been for a few colleagues of mine a better choice than sitting on the bus for an hour. Because they didn't like to wait half an hour for the bus and then 20 minutes, half an hour again in the bus. Jammed. Okay. Why is urban form important? Hint, that is a question on the study guide, is it? So I want you to think about all this economic stuff we have talked about, all the land uses we have talked about, the synergies between land uses, the different desires and prices for these land uses. They impact urban form too, not just the people living in there. So think about that. How does this relate to A, real estate principles, aka land prices and land uses? And how would you reflect that as a future property manager? To make that more property management rather than a price demand supply curve. Then we went through spatial models. Long story short, I did this one. Thing to keep in mind is that's the best place to put two competitors is on the same location back to back to use these kind of utility curves. This is the frictional space willingness of travel in this example. Yeah? And then use product differentiation to capture the customer desires. If they would both sell just ice cream, vanilla ice cream, the same size, the same price, they would not be able to stay in the business as wonderful they want to be. They make some profit, but they're not making maximization of that profit. The moment you put out different ice cream flavors, sprinkles, poppers, or what they call those popper things and all that, all this funny stuff, and nitrogen, frozen ice cream, all that, that makes a difference in the consumer. Best example here, again, is McDonald's versus Burger King. Big Mac or Whopper. Burger King fries or McDonald's fries. Huh? Are they both Coca-Cola products? Or is one Pepsi and the other is Cola? No, they're both Coca-Cola. Are they? Depends.
Yeah.
On the regional market?
I've seen some Burger Kings that are Pepsi and others that are Coke, so that's why I did.
Alright, that's so maybe that's a differentiation in the regional market. Like literally, if you're even here, if you're on Lauderdale, if you say, hey, I get a Coke, and they're like, if you go to a restaurant, I get a Coke with little ice, and they're like, oh, we have Pepsi products, is that okay? You know? So think about that, there is a differentiation. Some people don't like Coca-Cola, some people like Pepsi more. Alright? Again, the linear city consumption function here with consumers as a market, put both markets locations, shop locations at the same spot. And then do product differentiation to conquer market share. Same thing with residential land uses. Because you're close to a college facility, you will see more apartments and smaller condos. How do they differentiate? 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. A little bit in the sizing, a little bit smaller, a little bit higher, and then the price. But they're somewhat in the same area, are they? If you do that kind of research. Around college here, they're somewhat in the same area. They differentiate by what? Size of the pool, coin laundry or laundry on site, free laundry, other amenities. Coolness of the clubhouse. I personally haven't been yet to Plantation 1 and 2 residential towers. I've seen floor plans, but I haven't been inside yet. Know a bunch of people who used to live there. But a different experience in how you feel in that space is important. Yes, please.
You went on Long Plantation? Or?
Yeah. The 2 twin towers, right? 595 on University. So think about that. This model can be used in retail, could be used also in multifamily. How do you deal with market shares based on product differentiation? Alright, we close this whole thing with lessons learned. I'm basically saying location, 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 but we end up here as well, the same price and products need to alternate. And it goes back to the equilibrium location that is a function of demand and supply with location. Because at every location you have a different demand and supply function for that location. And that's the reason to have that slide down. And that's the reason why I have, again, that slide with the red lines and then local regional peaks. Because at some locations you have an increase again in that bid rent curve. Think about that. If you're at the lake and you take a stone, you smack the water on one side, you start having those waves, and you take a stone and throw it somewhere in the middle of the lake, it causes another wave. So you have ripple effects coming through. Make sure it's illegal that you actually, when you throw a stone and nobody actually arrests you for that. Finally, we did talk about spatial models and the regional components on this. It's very briefly mentioned in the book. Base multipliers is one of the examples mentioned in the book. Or economic indicators. What do we mean with this? Basics and non-basics are meant. We have an economy, a circle of economy. You see businesses and households, other businesses, and non-local economy. They are doing trade with each other. If you go to the local supermarket, you buy a loaf of bread, you have a transaction between them. Local supermarket bought the bread from a local bakery, maybe, or bought it from a bakery in Georgia and shipped it from there. So you have a different trade cycle here. Based on that, we can differentiate can divide our local economy into two different sectors, the non-basic and the basic sectors. What?
Oh no, okay,
You're like, ooh, what's that?
wait, no, I was like, wait a minute, I got it, that's all.
Yeah? So you can divide that. You're one or the other. You are dealing with dependent on external factors, that means actually export things, or you're just included inside. There's a ton of mathematics in Excel to do. It's really fun. If you consider credit program later after this is one of my classes. We're doing this like for 3 or 4 hours, building a model in Excel. I didn't even put a screenshot up on that Excel model for you guys. But I want you to understand, when we go even further, that you can use enrollment and payroll data to figure out how viable your regional economics are. How's the tourism sector here? How's the cruise service industry doing here? Hospitality versus insurance. Yeah? So you could compare Miami-Dade County, or you could compare Broward versus West Palm, those 3 counties, against their ratios inside and national standards. You will see which sector goes up and which sector goes down. There's a bunch of, like 12 different sectors you usually take into account, industry sectors. Agriculture and forestry and fisheries is one of them, as an example, versus insurance versus finance. And you can see here the local employment versus the basic employment in that specific sector, then you can divide that up. The understanding you need to bring in, this is now a new slide. The understanding you need to bring in is, if I have a change here in my employment, I will change this as well, and I have outcomes. The base multiplier gives a general description on the productivity, let's say on employment in a region. Which means, if I introduce basic employment, this is one of the sectors, basic employment and the base multiplier for my region is 5. I will then create all these, change in local employment is my base multiplier times the employment that will come. So if you're, let's say, Amazon, and they say, hey, we're going to come in, not with our headquarters, but we're going to have a sub-headquarter here, and with 1,000 new people as jobs. And then your base multiplier would be in your region right now, based on all these calculations, 5. But it would mean, in this example, if they qualify as a basic, it would be 5 times 1,000 is the total amount of employment generated with this new 1,000 jobs. Remember we had this example that one engineer will have certain ripple effects, secondary and tertiary effects on employment. Like how many engineers do you need for additional barbershops or bakeries or breweries? This is something, the idea about that. So the example here, base multiplier of 5. I bring in 1,000 people. That means I will generate a total of 5,000. I bring in 1,000. So locally, I generate 4,000 additional jobs to find the 5,000 complete. Okay? Does this make sense? All right. Let's assume you come in as an investor and say, my industry is really good. My industry produces additional jobs because of multiplier effects. Yeah? Because for every job I bring, X amount of jobs will get generated. The base multiplier helps you with that statement. And the argument why the city of Fort Lauderdale will pay you tax incentives. Yeah? Because you say in our example, hey city, Broward County has in my industry, I bring in my industry with 1,000 new jobs. base multiplier is 5, calculation of the change in total new employment is 5 times 1,000, it's 5,000. So, we said give me a moment, everything in your industry can be separated into a basic and non-basic. One that produces ripple effects and one that doesn't produce ripple effects. Yeah? So if you produce ripple effects, you cause other jobs to get generated. So if you bring in 1,000, but you know you're producing a total of 5, the calculation is simple. You just say total produced minus the ones you bring in. So 5,000 minus thousands you bring in, left over is 4,000 generated locally in your economy. That is so often abused when it comes for finding new locations. As in, hey, we're a big company, we are coming to your region, what can you offer us? We are aware that you have a specific base multiplier, your economy is going to get a boost because we bring in 200 more engineers. Each engineer will have a house, will have kindergarten places, will have bakeries, restaurants, etc. How much tax incentive and tax cuts can you give us for the next 10 years? Well, there's a trade-off. Companies know that. You as economic developer know that. You as a property manager are in between because you want those 1,000 people to come. Why? Because a total of 5,000 jobs is going to be generated. 5,000 jobs means for you as property managers, housing demand, income for housing, purchasing power, aka you tenants are going to be able to pay rent on time, ahead of time, which is great for your cash flow. Alright? Alright, cool. That was a long review. I hope you get an idea. Tenant.
What's the size of the base multiplier for a
You're going to calculate for each region specifically.
what are the factors that go into calculating?
I would start and say I calculate, let's say go to the census webpage for Bureau of Labor Statistics and you download the county business patterns. So it's fairly simple to do that on county patterns, because the geographic area is large enough to avoid noise in the statistics and the calculations. And you download all those different industry sectors. But technically you download 4 tables. Let's say 2010, 2005 for Broward County. And then you download the same statistics for 2010, 2010, 2010, 2015 for, let's say, the US context. Because what you need is you need to have a comparison for this location quotient. You need to have the share of a share compared to something. So you do that. For the base multiplier, you calculate the base multiplier. With the location quotient, you get basic and non-basic employment. And therefore, you can actually calculate that towards total population, and you get that specific number. It doesn't have to be 5, it could be 4.67, could be 15. If it was the year before 7 and now it's 15, your calculations are wrong, because it's not that dynamic. But it's a solid first level indicator on what kind of industries, let's say fisheries versus insurance versus health, or financials, which one is more dominant based on employment or payroll in an area. And you can also say, hey, does this make sense to add to this or not? A lot of the stuff is done, and basically you run this for the whole US on county level, and you decide, Miami-Dade or Broward, what's the better market for me? Could be one indicator besides location. Could be one indicator as in, what kind of economic policies can I try to find out? What kind of economic policies as, let's say, a county or a state do you need to do and say, hey, this industry is completely non-represented and we would like to have a share of that. What do? State of Delaware gave a special banking act and all the banks moved into Delaware. And now the financial sectors and banking sectors in Delaware is extremely high because of the representation and the jobs. Is it high-end banking? Not necessarily. It's like, used to be thousands of telemarketing jobs, call centers. But it's a Bank of America call center. So, all right. You ready? For more? All right. Fun topic. Let's talk about law. Everyone's like, shucks. Every land use we discussed, aka, no, let me rephrase it. Every property type we discussed so far, residential, commercial, office, retail, industry, needs to be founded in land use descriptions and zoning codes. Yeah? Because for some reasons, everything has to be founded into a planning law level where we can define a specific type of land, has to have a specific type of zone. Therefore, it has to be a specific type of use, density, or economic means how to use that land. All right? We already start here with the economic means, because if we talk about zoning, it comes down to the public use of land, and the public well-being, the public good. Sometimes also used as a public interest. It's like the book talks about the public good, which means the local communities are trying to deal with the health, welfare, and the safety of its residents and its lands in a community. Does the city of Davie care about the lands in Kendall? Nah, not really. Does the city of Davie care about what's happening in Plantation? Kinda. Yeah. Because part of a good neighborhood philosophy is you need to know what's going on with your neighbors, and we will see that has changed over time. Earlier it was elbows, and now they might do actually regional comprehensive plans. Regional planning versus just my little neighborhood planning. Alright, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a little bit more entertainment into that fairly dry planning law, real estate law stuff in the book. This is super important because it has different levels. First, I'm going to talk about the powers of zoning that trickle down from constitutional law into local municipalities. Yes, the power to police is not just law enforcement. It's actually the land use of the building you're standing in or sitting in. Yeah? So we're going to have a few slides on that, which is kind of cool, because there's certain things you're like, hey, I did not know that. Yeah? It's constitutional, actually, the zoning stuff. That's not just a funny looking map. Then, before we go actually into Supreme Court cases, as I call them, conflict resolutions on old history stories, we're going to default back, jump into the other chapter in the textbook and talk about the private rights and issues of ownership. Yeah? Because if we understand the private right of ownership from chapter number 3, we can go back then and talk about the public issue when it comes to public versus private. I try to get that done in a compressed manner, as entertaining as well. And let me add some inspiration. This is not going to last till 10 o'clock. So I can do till 11, I don't want to. This is not a planning law lecture with a planning law book like this big. Okay? This is the idea that you know some milestones that explain ideas of eminent domain, milestones that explain, let's say, takings, milestones that explain fundamental concepts of zoning. And why this one Supreme Court case from 1926 is so important still today. Actually, the first, not today, but the 74 and 78 cases are this year again up to date. Yeah? So hold tight, breathe. If you need to take a small break, step out, stretch your legs. I'm trying to do this in one piece. Alright? Bear with me, change the seating position because some of you are almost falling asleep. Yeah? I'm excited. Why? Because this is really fun. It's a fun topic. There's so many little fun things in there where you say, why did they have to go and sue for the next 10 years and we end up in the Supreme Court? You could talk to your neighbor about that. Apparently you can. All right. Some amusement, not in my backyard. Well known. Yeah. Once in a while it pops up. Those windmills. Yeah. They destroy birds. They are bad for migration. And they're all over the place now. And people will tell you something different. But back in the 60s, 70s, nuclear power was the same thing. Yeah? Not in my backyard, or NIMBY, basically means local guy is articulating their needs versus government or private companies. Yeah? You have it all the time. Different forms now. We have Twitter now, we have blogs. Yeah? So instead of standing there with a sign, you probably tell a million people on Twitter that you don't like this. Yeah? Alright, so zoning, the power to zone. There are two fundamental constitutional rights or principles that are actually feeding into the power of zoning. One is the 14th Amendment and the other one is the 5th. Huh? The 14th feeds into the due processes that feed into administrative processes later. And the 5th is the one that always gets people in trouble. One is eminent domain as an example, which is a really interesting tool to use for the government or governmental functions in execution for the public good and health, welfare and safety to take private property for public use. Alright, let that sink down again. Digest, repeat. Eminent domain is a really cool tool for governmental functions or the government to take private property for the purpose of the public good as it is defined for health, welfare, and safety. It is also very, very abused as a tool. That's the reason why I have those Supreme Court cases around eminent domain. Why? Because some people didn't play with the playbook the right way. And some people didn't like that. One case we're going to take a look at is briefly noted in the textbook, and it's worth to really push the button here. And I have videos, short story videos about it, so it's not just me telling you the story. Is Kilo versus New London, also known as the Little Pink House. Yeah? Also known as a Pfizer pharmaceutical company dealing with the city of New London and economic development ideas, how to get rid of a few hundred homeowners to put a new research development complex instead of the little homes into that place. And use eminent domain to clear the path. In a classic sense, I'll come back to eminent domain later, but in a classic sense, eminent domain is a tool for acquiring lands for larger infrastructure projects, interstates, airports, railroads. Most of the railroads here in the US are privatized. This is private property. Yeah, so if you take a look at, let's say, Washington DC area, Maryland, the track between DC, Baltimore, and Philadelphia, back in the days, the Amtrak train had to wait until Norfolk or CSX freight was coming through. Yeah, they have different speed, they have different schedules, because Amtrak rented that track for passage. Yeah? We're going to talk about that later because there's some concept we do as easements. So you could consider that as a traffic easement. Yeah? Alright. Eminent domain, really cool tool. Come back a little bit later. really cool tool, as in when it's done the right way with the certainty of non-abusive powers. Transparent, transparent, transparent. One issue we have seen with local government, like the planners and the planning department, is there are barriers. In the real estate process, there are always barriers. Throw something in, another restriction, another density limit or something like this. Eminent domain is even worse. It's like the dark side of planning. Eminent domain is also a bad word in planning or planning law. The other bad word is moratorium. It's like the emergency stop of processes. Not sure if I have slides on that. All right, and we talk a little bit about public use of land, like a public access. Yes, please, Dennis.
Is there a third party that decides like what just compensation is between like a landowner and a government?
Yes and no. Difficult topic. We're not going to go there in depth. It's just compensation or market compensation, the opposite, was a huge issue in those eminent domain cases. Why would you now lock the prices for a home as $200,000 and you're buying everything up and the home would be now, or land would be worth $1 million now? So who's going to fill the gap in between? Yeah. So traditionally you would declare, okay, this is the purpose of the project, and we will set the price level of a specific point in time in the past. Kind of a fair compensation deal with that. So you don't get into like rapid increasing market prices. Like, hey, have you heard Georgetown University is buying up land? Have you heard they're buying up lands here? That's, even here, this university is landlocked. Imagine what the market would do if the university would start buying lands under the radar. Like a shadow company of a shadow company of a shadow company buying up this house, and this house, and then if you look carefully, you just created a new track that is big enough for a parking garage. Stuff like this. And big urban universities have been in criticism of that. Georgetown was, I think, one of them. Yeah, it was. They bought land all over the place, under the cover, like literally under the radar. Not to make market prices crazy and all that. University of Cincinnati, where I went through, north of them, a whole retail residential stretch was under eminent domain lawsuits for years. Because the developer wanted to build that up because the developer wanted to cooperate with the university with student housing and mixed-use developments. So another famous mixed-use eminent domain case is the city of Norwood versus, I think, 6 different people. That's a city, island style, located in the Cincinnati area. Legendary cases, while the other cases have been running as well. The Ohio had its own little eminent domain case. And so in the early 2000s, 2003, 2005, we had a series of eminent domain cases, and state governments changed their property rights after that. One decision made in, let's say, Connecticut, governor in Idaho talks to the land use lawyers at the cocktail party, we need to change this. Reason why I know? Because I know that one of the land use planners that was at that cocktail party. So, really hot topic, one of the later cases in class tonight. Alright, so, to keep in mind, again, the 14th Amendment does regulate certain markets. Yeah? We also have to check, this is kind of a check if you're doing all right in terms of planning law. If yes, then probably no violation at the end. So again here, public needs for health, safety, and welfare. This is kind of a checklist of all the little things you need to keep in mind. As a real estate developer, yeah, you shouldn't really care about that too much, but it's important that you need to know. As a property manager, yeah, you shouldn't really care too much about it, but this is the governmental side of the private rights. We're talking like 10-15 minutes. And you do need to know the private rights. Because one of the big things in terms of the private rights is the idea of the CCRs. And you need to know what and how you deal with what they are and how do you deal with that, because that is more restrictive than state and federal law at certain times. that determines how you paint the walls outside of your building. If you put a flagpole or pink flamingos, I think that's the example in the book, yeah, into the front yard or not. This is like the dark side of homeowner association. It's even worse. In Florida, nobody is laughing about that, but homeowner associations are not really known in other parts of the country. They're not that powerful. CCRs are. Yeah? Covenants, constraints and restrictions. So, if we go to the zoning background, if we think about where do we come from the power of zone, what does this actually mean? Yeah? It means, again, we give through the Constitution 14 and 5, we give a government in any fraction of level of government the power to zone, power to police. Yeah? Police power is different here, but the police power is not necessarily the police, it's not necessarily just the cops, law enforcement. Yeah? It is policing building codes, policing land use violations as well. Yeah? Local, regional, state government. The reason why I put local, state, and regional government in there is because you have, depending where you're at in the US, depending which state you are, you have different hierarchies. Who is responsible for which area? State police versus Broward County Sheriff versus local police departments. They execute certain policing levels in a different way. They support each other a lot, but they have specific response trainings for specific tasks. They're not always responsible for a traffic accident. We are looking in depth on health, safety, welfare. Every case we're going to discuss today is health, safety, and welfare. And means of economic means. Economic means. Or the reduced economic means of the property. Alright. And the book actually talks about power to use taxation. And yes, we are not going to talk and calculate property taxes. I'm going to skip those 2.5 pages from the book. Yeah? If you're really interested in accounting and property rates, tax rates, the book gives you this wonderful example. You can do that. For the purpose of this class tonight and giving you a knowledge transfer when it comes to zoning and planning law, we're skipping the mathematics in that. Yeah? This is actually interesting because if you look at the history of cities, in the medieval age, when you have been a city-state, you had the right to govern, and you had the right to tax and the right to mint. You have been allowed to print money for the king. Yeah? So this is coming from this similar area then, of transport. What does this mean? Well, I've been talking about different government types. So, besides a city or a county or a state, what do we have? So we have multiple ones. Going through all these. I want to point out the idea of special districts. Yeah? Counties is a no-brainer. Cities is a no-brainer. Then you have incorporated, non-incorporated, or non-chartered. Yeah? That's fine. You can figure this out as well. But then you have parishes. Southern states have that. Yeah? I think Alabama was it. Yeah? And then special districts. Special districts, think, let's say, larger water management districts. Think sewer districts. If you have like a series of small towns in a county or something like this, there might be one large sewer treatment facility organized under the rule of a special district. Yeah? Could be different taxation districts as well. School levies, school districts kind of fall into that governmental structure as well. We have one major school district here, don't we? Broward County. What if we had 3 or 4 different school districts? They would run under the special districts idea. Yeah? Because where you live, you have different taxation and levy for the school district fees then. Alright, Then we differentiate between legislative and administrative decisions. Should take that out as well. Yeah? One thing you need to understand, if we talk about zoning, and I have the slide later for the so-called comprehensive plan. Zoning is the law because it comes from constitutional principles. Yeah? When we talk about land use and zoning, we usually talk about a land use plan, current existing land use map, and the future land use plan. That is what the city puts out as the future vision of the community in form of a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan usually states 15 to 25 years into the future. This is where we have been 5 to 10 years ago or 100 years ago. This is where we end today. And this is what we want to be based on community input and consensus in the community in 15 to 20 years. If you do this the right way, you have a series of meetings, town hall meetings, charrettes, brainstorming sessions, input sessions, and you ask members of the community, hey, what do you think will be in 15 to 20 years? Should we be a family-oriented community? Or are we open for major retail development? Two differences between plantation and daily. If you look carefully, plantation has kind of the philosophy of we don't want to have major retail development like a Costco, like a Whole Foods again in our area. Then daily. Plantation has the mall, a university in Broward. Everything else is pretty much a somewhat residential flair and flavor. Because the community has a different sense how they want to grow and how they want to develop. Interesting case actually if you look here at Davie and how they envision themselves and look into the comprehensive plan and different growth goals. It's really cool stuff to read. We might actually have the time to do that tonight. It is the law. So existing land use, future land use, and then you have what we call the zoning map. The zoning map is the visual manifest showing the dedication of a zone on the map by each parcel and dedicated face and so on. Yeah? It's so that you actually go into the town, to the records, and can read for every deed of every parcel in town, aka let's say your house, what's the zone for that? What's the land use for that? Are you confirmed in that zone? Or are you in violation? If you're in violation, they come out and do an inspection on you. So the comprehensive plan is the vision statement and the future development for the city, for your community. And it will have typically demographics in there, some community profile, the vision statement, some include now emergency management, and it must have land use map and zoning map as the visual description of legal text. Because the zoning code is like this long in a big binder stating how you define single family homes. And every yellow speckle on the map then is a single family home dedicated area. Alright. If you don't like the law, you can fight the law, and there are different ways to do that. Like boards of appeals, Supreme Courts. This is not a decision about your building permit for a barbecue deck. This is different. It's administrative. This is like, hey, I want to rezone this residential into commercial office use. I want to change the legal description of the usage on that property. Change the legal description of the usage, allowed usage of that property. Alright. Then we can go through this a little bit faster. You have in the administrative decisions, you have variance, conditional use, and you have, let's say, similar uses, administrative appeals. For the purpose of this presentation, just keep in mind, a variance gives you wiggle room under specific circumstances to do minor adjustments to your property. Yes, please.
So like,
for example, if the property is zoned, like, let's just say, a single family home, can you, you request a variance if you wanna build like a townhome on it or something?
No, you have to rezone for that.
So,
Because a townhome would be a different zoning description, and depending on the city you're in, on the code you're in. Let's assume you have, let's say, a property that's a single family home at this moment and would allow for, let's say, 3 townhomes on there. A single family home would be 1 dwelling unit per that size, so 1 dwelling per area. That makes the example simple because we don't have acreage. 1 dwelling unit per on that space.
yeah,
If you put 3 townhomes on, there would be 3 dwelling units on that space, on that specific area. So you increase density. If that is not noted in the zoning ordinance, in that specific zone, that you would be allowed to do that, you need to rezone. But it's an interesting concept because this is how infill development will occur over time. That you buy 1 or 2 single family homes next to each other, take them out, and you're planning to put 4 townhomes on it. Same space, but different facade, different setup. Instead of a ranch style single family home, 1 floor only, you put 2 floors up and increase floor area ratio. The book is really interesting. There's really cool pictures in terms of 100% coverage on the lot, or if you take 2 floors, you can build the same amount of floor space, but you have half the lot open for parking or green space. Don't want to go into depth on how you calculate floor area ratio and coverage, but in case of variance, to come back here, so you would have to rezone, potentially rezone. In case of variance, what you could do is you bought a house in a subdivision. The model house had a deck attached to the house, and showed nice seatings and a nice barbecue out there. You bought the house, they built it, you don't have a deck. Turns out only the model house had a deck. But you take a look at the other side, your neighbors has a deck. So you ask your neighbor, how did you get the deck? And he's like, well, I went to the city and asked for a variance for deck permit. That means you're asking kind of for wiggle room. Can I increase my quality of life of my own in my own property based on some space in the legal interpretation of how a building has to look like? There could be a regulation that says no decks allowed, no patios are allowed. Or it says if you want to screen your patio, you're only allowed to screen it in that type of color on the metal framing.
so anytime you wanna do like a adjustment to your house or something like structural wise, you have to most
Every-
likely a variance?
No. If you do a structural change of your house, you need to go through to the building department and ask for a building permit.
Well, like I'm saying, like how you're saying you're building a patio, so you would still need a building permit, right?
Yes.
But that's
What if a patio is or a deck is not allowed in your zone currently?
Oh, so if only variance if it's not allowed, you wanna get an exception?
Say wiggle room.
Okay.
It's not necessarily exceptional. No? It's in that specific case they grant you that variance.
Yeah.
As in, well, it's not really threatening to the health, welfare, and safety of the community, but it will increase your personal well-being.
Yeah.
There's some wiggle room to it. Does not mean that Holly will get it. If she comes back in 2 weeks later and says, you got it, her is a different case. If she doesn't get it, she might appeal, doesn't run an appeal on it, and all that. The interesting thing is conditional use here. The variance is not timed. The variance is granted. Conditional use is a specific allowance of change of use on the property for a specific time and use of that property. Let's say you have an old manufacturing shop in the backyard, and you still do a little bit of business, but technically your whole property is residential. So you could ask for conditional use to use the backyard barn as like a manufacturing for your little tiny business. Yeah? You will probably get that conditional use approved. All your neighbors have a say in that because adjacent property owners are going to be asked for that. But the conditional use is probably going to be restricted with two things. The cease of existence of the company. That is, if you're 1 or 2 days out of business, boom, it's gone. So you have to demonstrate that you're continuously in business. And the other part is, some of those conditional uses are bound to a deadline, expiration date. Could be, let's say you have a rather environmentally sensitive area, you're asking for residential development in that area, but you have certain other conditions to fulfill. A regional planning commission or a city would give you a conditional use to have specific steps done. But they set a deadline on this and say, hey, in 2020, let's say you applied for all this in 2015, you're a residential developer, and in 2020, that conditional use will expire. Now we're in 2018 and we're going to hit the fan, like we did in 2008. And you are not developing and you're not selling anything until early 2021. Your conditional use has expired. So you actually have to come back and reapply for that, stand in front of planning and zoning, stand in front of the council and get that approved. Because it's part of zoning, and still zoning is law. Yeah? That is a huge problem for those, let's say, that had issues in 2008, for the last 4 or 5 years at expiring C use. Yeah? So timing is always a problem. Alright.
I have a quick question. But the rezoning falls under administrative also, right?
Both, because you have to follow due process. Alright, due process of a zoning, rezoning. You do your due diligence. You really know what you want. You really know where to go. You apply, you communicate all the way through. That's important. Communicate. You just don't drop the application and show up 8 weeks or 8 months later in a seal to get the thing approved. No, you have to communicate about the issues. Alright, so you will make a decision you want to rezone the property. Yeah? Or it could be, example, you open up a pub and you need a liquor license and there's certain regulations for the state. Why? Why would that be? Why are you checking your emails while you're listening to my class? We keep before exams. Alright. I was thinking you were asking you laughing because I bring in an example of liquor license. Did that actually recently for a friend of mine. Researched that extra for him. So, in both cases, you need to notify adjacent property owners. The city and or you need to notify. In small towns, the city will do that because there's only 4 or 5 neighbors. Yeah? There has to be a public notice at the property and in the local newspaper, at the town usually as well, saying, it's hereby declared there is an application pending to do the following, move this into this zone, who's the involved parties, when is the public hearing. There's a notice time frame you have to put up. You can't just notify on Friday morning and Friday lunch you have this hearing. Yeah? In the case of the liquor license, it was, I think, 500 feet, or 1,000? 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet from the establishment, all people need to be mailed that information that this process is starting now. And they could have a say in that. Say, State of Delaware requires that all people there are involved. The absurdity is that the guy living in Florida is doing this for a friend in Delaware. Because the city in Delaware didn't do it anymore there. Personal issues. Used to work for the same city, so the service declined there. So, you have done all these processes. You stand in front of the PNC, Planning and Zoning Commission. You say, hey, this is my plan, this is what I want to do, this is why this is great for the neighborhood, this is great for the community, I make a little bit of bucks with it, okay, fine, but these are the pros and cons. You're going to be really transparent about that. This is my story here. Share it with me. Yeah? Then the angry Mr. Smith, nah, I'm against. Mr. Smith is the guy in the backyard sweeper. Mr. Miller from the other side, oh, we actually like this idea. We had actually a similar idea. We actually were really interested how you do this. Put like 2 or 3 townhomes there. Maybe we can talk. Maybe we add that and make this one development. So you go through all that. Then staff will produce a staff report. This is the application done. This is what we reviewed. This is our recommendation. And we usually end the application is in compliance or is in compliance with the goals of the comprehensive plan. No restrictions. Following suggestions is to approve or present in front of council. Because planning and zoning will approve it, and then come in front of council. Council will approve it, and then it turns into law. You are rezoned. Lots of signatures, lots of stamps, yeah? And you got your property rezoned. If you fail to notify properly, if you fail to hear all adjacent property owners that have a legal standing in that case, if planning and zoning is doing some bad mojo, yeah? If staff is messing up, giving a false recommendation based on, let's say, a second-degree cousin, and you talk to him and her or her at the family barbecue and say, I'm buying you a new car. Yeah? If all that can go wrong, you have a problem with the process. Famous lawsuits have been filed for that. Famous stories are told at the planners and lawyers happy hours. A friend of mine, she's a land use lawyer. She's a really good land use lawyer. She says the really cool thing about being a land use lawyer is I'm the only one who is allowed to tell stories about my clients during happy hour. Because everyone else is like client privilege. And I can't talk about the business deal here and there. Now, it's all public record. If your client screwed up in front of PNC, you can tell them that they screwed up. And it's also public record or public story. At some point of time, we had that in a prior position. I had the project manager of a large residential development coming. Scandal, a huge scandal, where the city clerk has a relationship thing going on with one of the lawyers of the application team. So everyone was like talking dirty about that's how they got all the variances because they had something going on the weekends. So really, really, really weird stories when you listen to that. I did recommend all the time, if you can't make it on time, to go to those meetings in your local community, find them online. PNC meetings are fun. All right, speaking of fun, let's go through. Mentioned the comprehensive plan already. Comprehensive plan is fairly short in the textbook. Yeah? Fairly short. You need to remember the idea of in accordance with comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan states the vision and the ideas of development in the for the future of the community. The future land use plan will express that, and the zoning map is current law for that endeavor. Okay? I put those links up. Please take a look at them. Go to the town of Davie, to the planning and zoning department, and take a look at their webpage. Let's just click on this one, just one at the end. Here, future land use map. Talking about all the future and all the time. Let's give you some visualization. This is the current existing land use. Huh? So you have here a legend agricultural, commercial, industrial, institutional, and it might not appear perfect with all the shades of yellow here, but you can see it's parcel based. You have different density in these areas, but you have large chunks. This area here is the regional activity center zone. I can see Nova Southeastern is coming up here sometime. This is Nova. You can see here the different corridors, those big chunks as zones. Not everything is yet developed. Then you scroll down and you see the flexibility zones, because there's also overlay you can produce. Now you can see that there are different zones with different numbers associated here, and in the zoning code it will tell you which number has what meaning. Building height, density, square footage. Do you have to use setbacks, or can you build straight up to the property line? Huh? Same thing here, planning areas, how they envision that. I say this is bad mapping because they should have used a little bit of description. What does number 1 mean, number 7 or number 10? Yeah? You gotta have that book open to read the description. That's not really user friendly, this one. It also shows what's vacant right now, what they think is vacant in the future. Yeah? Not much. It goes so far, and so far. It talks in detail the visualization of every piece they can imagine. Yeah? Flood zones, etc. Soil. Yeah? That's part of the idea of dealing with your comprehensive plan. You are not bound into a specific template, but you have to include certain elements. Yeah? Right. Innovation or innovative land use controls. The book is very interesting about that. It talks about planned unit development. Yeah? PUD talks about overlay zoning, talks about performance-based zoning, talks about transferable development rights, TDR, or purchasable development rights, PDR. Let's point them out just a little bit. Imagine just a zone go. If I have a zone on one of my parcels and one other one right next to each other, that's fine. It's parcel based. I also can create something what we call overlay zones. Water management, historic preservation, specific protection areas are really great examples for overlay zones. If you heard something about new urbanism, you might recall something that it's called form-based building codes. Yeah? So how to change urban design? Well, why don't I create a zoning overlay that allows for new building codes, new design codes in specific areas as part of, say, urban renewal, urban regeneration, and use that zoning overlay as an incentive to be a little bit more creative. Bless you. Yeah? Another example here for overlay zones is airports and traffic planning, air traffic planning, particularly with noise. There's a specific distance to an airport in the approach zone where you're not allowed to build a 10th floor high building. Why? Because there might be a bunch of airplanes they want to pass beside the building. No, it doesn't work. No? That's the reason why you have a lot of warehousing around airports, because they're fairly flat, and there's this kind of synergy between them. You know, airports need warehousing for logistics. Alright, so coastal zone management for those in marine bio and coastal management is also interesting. Wetlands is an overlay zone. This is extremely feasible, isn't it? Alright. Think about, in addition to what's on the ground, I can slap another overlay. Multiples, if I want to. Specific animal protection zones. Airports need to go through a specific FAA approval to make changes to their infrastructure. Why? Because there's so many little things in terms of environmental protection to be recognized. So they're going through that as well. Alright. Then you have floating zones. It's not really a common thing. Deals with conditional use. Yeah? So you would rather actually refer to this is going to be a conditional use. You're not saying, oh, we have to assign this floating zone for that property. You're saying, well, we're going to assign or we're going to apply for conditional use on that property. And that's the famous examples are actually churches. Yeah? Because you can start your church in your garage. There is actually a famous Supreme Court case with the Freedom of Religion and Land Use Act, or REE, where family members got sick and they actually started to have a place of worship on their property, in their house. And then actually the neighbors got really concerned about that because Sunday afternoon, let's say between 6 and 8, they got 60 cars in that little subdivision, just visiting and coming over there. Yeah? Not creating much nuisance but traffic. And they went through this whole thing in a different way. They actually had problems with religious freedom in this case. I have 1 or 2 slides on that if you get to that.
So a floating zone, you can kind of like do that anywhere. It's not like
You're applying for conditional use. You're basically applying for grant me a variance for that specific type of use. Yeah? So as long as you create, let's say, a church in your backyard, as long as or daycares, in some municipalities, daycares are also an example for that. Because if you do a daycare at your home, you pretty much create a business in a residential use. Therefore, you should actually apply for a business license and you should get a conditional use permit for that. If you stop doing your daycare, then conditional use will expire and get voided. So, interesting concept, easy to abuse because here is a variance, here's a conditional use, here's a conditional use. And at the end, you will end up with conditional uses. If you would be in a planning department, entry-level job could be also go through all the conditional uses and check if they have changed and hunt them down and basically say, you're not in compliance anymore, that conditional use is voided. Kind of a fun job. Alright, performance standards. The book is very detailed about that, where you can actually say, okay, fine, you can set up different goals to get on these properties, and you add flexibility. Could be design, could be density. Again, I don't want to go too in depth on that because I don't want to stay here till midnight with you guys. There's a lot of little details, and the book is a very nice flow to read. I just want to point out that there's specific amounts of real world application here, and then on the other side there's a bunch of theoreticals. Yeah? Performance standards depends where you're at. Depends on the size of your development. Fairly probably not in existence for a one single residential home, single family residential. Yeah? If you want to develop 300 acres, I would take a look at that. Because you might actually get some benefits out of it and some incentives to work with the city to create a special zoning district. Which leads us very closely to the idea of planned unit development, which is your own special zoning district entity. You're not anymore a specific overlay here or following specific standards. Yeah? You literally create your sub-binder in the big book of zoning code. Alright. Then we have something we have had in the last 15 to 20 years, in one way or the other. The traditional neighborhood design comes from new urbanism, which was kind of funny because the guys who were really pushing this for the last 15, 20 years are now declared that they failed with the idea. No? High density, mixed use developments, $300,000, $400,000 homes, not in Miami. We're talking about, let's say, Philadelphia area. Didn't really work out, but the idea was, okay, increase the urban density, reduce sprawl. Fight these leapfrog developments that not just a mile next to the last development, no, 10 miles out, because transportation costs didn't manner. We had that last week with sport. Yeah? And the traditional T&Ds came to the idea, tons of design guidelines. Instead of a legal description, you can see 20 pages how a house should look like. Is the garage in the front of the house or right next to the entrance? Like, does it look like a dog snouts, or is it next? Or in new urbanism, they actually went back to the alley and said the garage should face the backyard alley, and even the mailbox is not anymore in front of the house. It could be in the backyard alley, or in a central pickup place like we see here in residential developments. You have 30 boxes at one little tiny hut, like a mini station, and post agent delivery guys are just coming, opening all of them and dropping all of them at once rather than 20 or 30 little stops. Yeah? Huge difference in logistics. Also difference in neighborhood events. How you interact with your neighbors. You're not just talking to them to the left and to the right, over the fence or in front of the garage. You might bump into some people picking up the mail. You know, because you just come home at 5 o'clock, leave the car in the garage. Actually, you might do it not that way. You drive by the mail stall, pick up your mail, hop back into the car, drive to your house, click on the garage door opener, drive into the garage. Garage is closest, so you take the groceries and your work bag into the kitchen. Sounds familiar? Zero interaction with your neighbors, huh? Then the next moment you can move into an apartment building in New York and you don't care who lives next door to you anything. So, traditional neighborhood design does not necessarily mean that you turn into a traditional neighborhood where you know everyone, where your 60-year-old is causing something down the street and they all know, it's Thomas. You're this one from that family. The whole town knows you at some point. No, doesn't exist in that concept. It's completely constructed. It's not organic at all. Alright? Then, typo. We go into transit-oriented design. If you haven't had the chance yet, take a ride with the Bright Line train. If you don't know the Bright Line train, Google it. It's amazing. Did you ride it yet? It's a German high-speed train. It's really good. Yeah? Hop here on the station in Fort Lauderdale, costs what, $15, $20 depending on the day and travel time. They have a little bit like an Uber demand search pricing. Take a bunch of friends, hop on the train here, run down to Miami Central. Yeah? A fantastic architectural monster. They're putting like $3 billion of development in the surroundings and into the station. High-speed train down there, no stop. Walk around in the station, great food court. It's connected to the metro mover. You can take an Uber. It's right around the corner from, is it the US Airlines? No, American Airlines arena or the Frost Science Museum. You don't have to actually take a cab. You can walk those 2 or 3 blocks. Yeah? So a really cool day trip for some fun. Yeah? Experience a different mode of transportation. If you've never ever been in a high-speed train, this is the simplest way to do that. And if you take a look at this, transit-oriented design means this is my train station, this is my condo tower. I walk across the street, maybe even a sky bridge, and I'm gone. My best example for transit-oriented design, if you ever fly to Europe, take a tour on Frankfurt Airport. High-speed, long-distance train on one side, you pass the interstate, walk on a sky bridge across the interstate, and you're right in Terminal 1. And then you fan out to, or branch out to anywhere you want to go. Takes you 7 minutes from the high-speed bullet train to go up, walk into the gate agent. That's connectivity. Yeah? Not finding for half an hour some long-term parking and spend half an hour in the shuttle, and then hopefully you get on the plane. Alright, PUD. Planned unit development. This is a very cool thing. Being abused, but it's a very cool thing. If you have the proper size for the development and the proper communication going on, you can be able to actually say, I'm not just developing one land use, I'm developing a barrage of land uses. Let's call it mixed use. I need some freedom to develop my land. Densities do not really work out right now with the city's land use on zoning ordinances. Can we create a planned unit development? I increase present higher densities, I present this one better here, this one better there, of different designs and all that. So you make it all inclusive, more comprehensive. And usually the city believes you and they probably make that deal with you. And then you do your own little zoning district and you can abuse all the zoning powers you want. So again, really cool tool, some abusive power possible. How does this look like? Oh, not yet. We can skip this one. How does this look like? On one side, you can see an example. This would be a typical cookie cutter, best bang for the buck. I don't really care what's going on with corridors and vegetation and topography here. This is development we have seen over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah? Then you can argue, well, why don't we deal with a little bit more, a better concept? Why don't we create a planned unit development where we have smaller lots, because your zoning code defines a lot size as well. Why don't we shrink the lots, put a different design of building on top? I haven't done the count, but just visualizing it, it might be the same, if not even more units you could place here than here. Yeah? You have a more elegant road network, it's more compact, and you have all these recreation areas registered, even a horse pasture. Huh? Would be great if you could see that. Not always working out like this. Alright. Another thing the book is really big about, and I think we are pretty close to purchase development rights. There are two concepts. Purchase development rights and transfer development rights. Think about that. You have two different parcels, and both are allowed to build 10 units on them. What if I want to keep one as is right now, reservation of land, old historic building. I don't want to take down the old farmhouse, but I would like to use that kind of development right somewhere else. So what I can do now is I have a purchase of the development rights. You retain all the other rights on the property, but you give away the right to develop new stuff on it. State of Delaware did that successfully in the early 2000s. They wanted to preserve meadows and farmland. So they ran in and said that to start something what we call a land bank, and they bought up development rights from farmers that are considering actually to stop their business. Yeah? And instead of selling a bunch of acres to the next residential developer and doing some really, really bad housing on it, yeah? Ugly, cheap housing, they said, hey, why don't we do this? We buy all the property rights, development rights, and bank them, and then we can shift them around. That means if I have two parcels right now, I would buy the 10 development units here. I would have now the development rights of 20 on mine. Could be 20 single-family homes, smaller lots, could be townhomes. Yeah? So the whole idea is, it's like almost like if you play Risk, and you have all these armies floating around on your continents, and you shift armies around. Yeah? You have the right with the army to defend that corner or attack. In this case, with development rights, you are allowed to develop on a specific property. You still need to apply for rezoning in the process. You still need to apply through the building department and the planning and zoning folks to get into that density levels if you want to physically build that. But you shift those rights around. Okay? Then there's also the transfer of development rights, which is slightly different because there are different parties involved, not necessarily the government. Yeah? This could be the same example, but it's private partners. I'm a developer, you're the farmer. I buy those rights again from you, you transfer them here. So keep that in mind. Transfer or purchase development rights is both a cool tool to actually increase density at the other location. Main difference is different ownerships and different partners are involved in that process. Outcome is similar. You preserve some space, you increase development on the others. That's as simplistic as I can explain that. Not going into any legal in-depth language. The book is really good at that, so don't get bloody fingers right now taking those notes. The book is explicitly good at that. Alright, for the time being right now, we skip this. Book doesn't really talk, no, they don't do that, tell. In sum, again, everything I've been talking about, the short overview on zoning and land use, and the idea of what the book gives you. The book gives you like 3 long paragraphs about the police powers of zoning. So all the talk we had tonight is about the police powers of zoning. All the little tools for innovative zoning is grounded in those 2 amendments, 14 and 5. Again, 14 is regulating the processes and the powers, and 5 is regulating the ownership and the misuse of ownership, aka takings. Okay? Let's talk about the private stuff. Alright, let's see. Where's it? Private stuff. That's chapter number 3. And I'm going to read down my notes. I don't really have PowerPoint for that. So if you haven't done that chapter, take a look at it. For property managers, this is probably the most important reading in the last 3 weeks. Alright, so do I have this slide? No. Alright, so if you look at the private restrictions, 3 stand out. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC and Rs. Liens and easements. Those are the 3 major points. If you just look at the way this chapter is built up, the way the chapter spends detailed time and context on those, it has to be something important that is important for real estate development, real estate principals, and you as property managers in the future. Yeah? So the CCRs is pretty much an agreement where the property owner makes restrictions on how the property shall be kept and upheld. All these zoning regulations read like commandments. You shall not or shall do. Yeah? And then through the court system and involved parties. So this is the important part. How it shall be kept and upheld through court system and involved parties. That means it's a legal agreement that is written into the statements, the deed of your property. That is important that you remember that. It's imprinted in your land, in your property. You can't take that away. Not without specific actions. It's a contract of you as a developer, how you want to see that land developed. And to uphold that contract or promise, book talks promise, you're making pretty much a deal and saying, if I'm in a violation with all this, you can sue me. Me, even as the property owner. I'm responsible for misactions and misuse of these promises and I put them down into my deed of my land, and I'm liable for every action I do. The book is really cool because it talks about like two guys creating a church on their property, putting a flagpole and putting a parking lot in their backyard. Yeah. The CCRs are more restrictive when it comes to violations than state or federal laws. If you are in an area where you have CCNRs and you do this little private church in your backyard, you're in complete violations. You have no standing. You can get really in trouble. That's the reason why I actually brought a few slides up here. This is an example. Can you see that? That triggered the discussion here. It used to be a church close to the Cincinnati area, next to the interstate. So think about you were here on 595, you instead of seeing like billboards with Nova Southeastern, you see this guy. Yeah. Computer died. So this is a few hundred feet high. $250,000 worth as a figure. And this is kind of the opener when you present that locally, you'll always remember. It goes through the whole idea of that execution of your religious beliefs is freedom of speech. Our Lupa is the example here. First case, Homer's weekly prayers constitutes a religious exercise with the meaning of Alupa is a constitutional right now. Supreme Court case. They had a prayer group in their backyard with the 60 people showing up on Sundays all the time. And the community complained about that. But they actually won that case because they executed their freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Yeah? The case in the book, and that's the reason why I brought in this example, the case in the book was more restrictive than a lightning strike. That used to be that Jesus here. Touchdown Jesus, that was the nickname of that guy. Yeah? The example in the book is interesting, that triggered that example here. Why? Because the CCNRs are more restrictive and they are constitutionally allowed to be more restrictive than state and federal laws. The book talks about, I can describe you not, restrict you not to put pink flamingos in your front yard, or a flagpole, or change the color of the house from yellow into green. If you live in an area where you have a homeowner association, think about that. You need to go to your homeowner association to ask them if it's okay to put storm shutters up, those accordions. And they approve that, then the city needs to approve the building permit. And there you put pink storm shutters up rather than the approved color of dark brown. It sounds really, really funny, but it is, those are why expensive lawsuits are done. Yeah? But CCNR, developer can actually write those limitations already into the plan. Before I build 150 units on my property, I can write all the limitations, how my townhomes shall look like, shall be built, shall be used. I can write that in and put that in every deed of every house I will sell. That stays with the deed. The trick also is that you as a developer, you form an initial type of homeowner association that is in charge on the powers of that CCNRs. And they vote on it. So yes, they can change that with a vote. Not all the time. They don't do that. Yeah? So already in the development process, you can put that in. Then, we require some approvals, yeah, for all the involved parties. If you do a significant change, everyone needs to approve that. Think about that. You want to do a change, be more restrictive, and 150 people need to agree on that. Good luck. Yeah? So, most of them must follow state and federal laws. Yeah? So, there are some exemptions to visualize that. I can put up restrictions with my CCNRs or homeowner association on how you are allowed, if you buy a condo with me or a co-op or townhouse, are you allowed to rent this out in the first year or not? Or do you need to maintain ownership before you're allowed to rent out? go on Zillow and you take a look at certain townhomes, it says allowed to rent out immediately, or must be homeowner used by like 2 years, and then you're allowed to rent. To avoid the idea of you drop $300,000 in a suitcase and then rent it out and make income, rather than you actually have to take the effort to move there and habitat that space. They can be that restrictive. Where they can't be restrictive is when it comes to discrimination, as let's say, or exclusions. You can't sell it, you can write in that you can't sell to, say, specific race or ethnic groups. Good luck with that. You're not going to win that. That's common sense. That's pure understanding. You can't say that you can't sell the house to only Germans, or vice versa. Germans are not allowed to purchase this. Yeah? I don't want to point out ethnic groups or something. Yeah? But you get the message. There are certain restrictions which are simply ridiculous, if you look at that sometimes with a humorous eye, and certain restrictions you say, hey, yeah, sure, that's not allowed. Yeah? The CCNRs are regulating the appearance of house and property. Imagine it. No flamingos, no parking on the street, change of colors must be approved, landscaping. Oh no, you're not going to put fir trees in front of the house. Or you don't put if you're planning they don't grow here. Or no birch trees. Why? They drop leaves, too many leaves. Yeah? They can restrict that. They can restrict the noise level on party activities. They can restrict if you're allowed to have animals on your property or not. Domestic animals. As in ducks, chicken, horses, goats. Depending on which area you are here in this region, you are allowed to have chicken or horses. If you have a proper lot size, the zoning code explains that. If you have a lot size of X acres, you are allowed to have horses or goats. If you're below that, you're only allowed to have like 6 chickens, no roosters or something. I told you it's kind of fun to talk about that. But the important part here is CCNRs are important for residential use. Multiple stakeholders involved. You can imprint those rules into the deed. Yeah? They can be enforced through the court. And for story and fun cases, page number 53. If you want to write that down, this is really fun read. Fun examples. The CCNRs are land-based. Theory, you can change the structure on top of the land on your property. That restrictions and those conditions are still in place on your land. Again, there's a bunch of folks to decide on that. They attach to land, not to the owner as a contract. You sell the land, you move away, the land maintains that restriction. It supersedes or trumps the public regulations. It's also drastic. Think about that. No? Yes, you can do a church as a residential use. Yes or no? Can you do a church as a residential use with a CCNR? No, we just had that. It's a great story in the textbook. No, you can't. Not in the way the textbook explained the circumstances. Yeah? Because the CCNR might have had the legal language written in there that you can't use that for places of worship. And that means you have to have a good lawyer, land use lawyer, because they are writing this stuff for you.
Professor, I'm sorry, what does CCNR stand for?
Short for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Chapter number 3, private restrictions. Chapter 3, is it? Chapter 4 is public.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah? It's the whole first third of the chapter. So the amount of taxation first, and then it comes to the CCNRs. Yeah? All right. No in the CCNR. Yes under the Religious Freedom Act, Land Use Freedom Act. Yeah? Remember the super touchdown Jesus. It's the best manifesto you can imagine here. This has something to do with religion, freedom of religion. All right. Finally, we got to go to liens. Yeah? That is, claim a property for debt or monetary obligations. A famous example is a mortgage. Yeah, or as we call it, a voluntary lien. A non-voluntary lien. What is a non-voluntary lien? What's the opposite of voluntary? What's a non-voluntary lien? Any ideas?
Say you got sued for something and didn't have the finances to secure that debt.
Exactly. If I have to cover debt with my property, yeah? Claims to real property, judgment or lawsuit, or unpaid taxes. Remember, a right for taxation is done by the municipality through the policing powers. Yeah? So, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're turning into a tax delinquent. At some point of time, knock knock, pay up. Yeah? Or it's part of the lien on the property. Who owns a car? Alright, who finances a car? Alright, how do you call your bank financing your car? How do you call at the DMV your bank financing your car? If you finance your car, you're not the owner, and the bank is your lien holder. Because you have financial responsibilities towards the bank about your car. Yeah, that's the reason why if you want to change your license plate, you come in from a different state and all that, you finance somewhere else, your bank needs, they own the title. They have the title. You should not have the title in your safe, or maybe you have a copy. But your bank that finances your car is your lien holder on the car. Why? Because if you can't pay up the car anymore, what they're going to do with it? They come in and take it away and auction it off, sell it off, and you hope that they actually pay up your debt. Yeah? So super examples. When we talk about voluntary mortgages, ring a bell? How to calculate those? That's fat foggy top area. I'm not touching that. Okay? So gotta remember voluntary mortgages, voluntary liens are mortgages. You do not remember how to calculate that in my context. You need to understand that there are voluntary liens and non-voluntary liens. Alright. What do we understand on the term general liens? Oh, yeah.
The general lien is on pretty much all of the holdings of an individual, like all of the properties, whereas a specific lien is on one parcel of land or one property.
Alright, what do you understand as a judgment lien then? Apparently he did the readings.
Judgment lien is legal judgment is passed to a lawsuit or something. It's placed,
So would that be like the involuntary one? Because
It turns into an involuntary one. It's the other way of saying this is actually an involuntary lien, aka a judgment lien, where you can say, okay, the winner in the lawsuit can go after the lien on the property. Meaning, I execute a judgment lien, therefore I have a standing to get monies back from potential sale. Whenever that sale happens, depending on the legal definitions in the judgment, that sale might be immediately. Yeah? And then therefore then you get your money back. The book has this really funny story about this guy who wants to rehab a building, didn't get a building permit for the roof, had months and months of delay. The city dropped him with delay fees, I think $200 a day. Then months and months later, he finally shows up, wants to make a deal. They refuse, they sue, they want to make a different deal. 5 or 7 years later, this whole thing is settled through a court order auction to pay up the legal fees and delinquent fees as well. Yeah? And pretty much just because you didn't get the permit on time and you didn't wait to get things done. Yeah? Alright. Wait is a good term. What is an easement? Easement. What do we understand as an easement? Ollie.
the right that a party has by a landowner to use the land in a specific manner.
Nice definition. The right given to one party by a landowner to use land in a specific manner. And I underlined like every second word of that. Yeah? The given right or the right given is one fact, yeah, to one party. So if Holly grants me that right, me, Gate, doesn't have that. It's my right. Okay? By a landowner, Holly, to use land in a specific manner. Holly gives me the right to pass her for an easement to, let's say, drop a sewer line into the ground. Yeah? I pay her for that. Some compensation is done for that, not just a handshake. The simplest way would be I dig a trench, put the sewer line in, and do some awesome landscaping on my pocket. And she has no cost at all, just some legal papers to sign. That would be the perfect way to do that. Simplest way. Okay? Then, let's say water pipes, utility companies, power lines. They're usually regulated with easements. A forest road, as an example, could be also, for passage, could be also done by an easement, which is interesting because there's actually now a new case developing in Idaho, where a Texas-based company locked all forest service roads with gates and trenches. So even the firefighters maybe could not come through. The idea is to prohibit hunters and recreational traffic to enter the property. We're talking about forest, mountainous forest. Yeah? And the scandal right now in the news is hunting season for elk starts in 8 days. Yeah? So people are worried about the public access for hunting into Idaho's wilderness. You're laughing about that example. I bring sea turtles in a moment, okay? At the end of the lecture, we have sea turtles discussion. All right, so there are different forms of easements. There's the easement appurtenant, that's between the dominant state and the servient state. Think about that. Example is the sewer line again. Yeah? And the book says that Bill pays Susan for the easement. Bill has a sewer line, puts it through the property of Susan. Yeah? He will be the so-called dominant state. And Susan, in his example, or Holly in our example, is the so-called servient estate. Keeps using the land, does not intervene with my sewer. Yeah? So she gives me the right to use that for a specific function, and she will not intervene. So she's not going to let me put water pipes through and then cuts the water pipe at some dispute point. I have a legal standing. If she does that, I have a legal standing that she's in violation with our agreements. And I'm also running trial for some time, multiple years for. All right, the example in the book is visualized very nicely with a sketch. What if both servient estate and dominant state have this side by side? It's a shared driveway example. And the absurdity is, there's one case there, they had a shared driveway, and from one day to the other day they had a dispute, and one party puts up a fence into the driveway, blocking access to the other one's house, and all that stuff. Like fence along the driveway, not across. So, real examples. Alright, then you have the easement in gross. Pretty sure that's a typo, probably French on form. In large. No dominant state, only the servient estate is part. Power lines are the example here. Power line across a property. The easement is granted to the company, not to the land by the owner. So different. There's not two property owners that make a deal, let's say for being landlocked, access roads, or utilities. No. In this case, a large company comes in and says, hey, Dave, can I build a power line on your property? Will you give me an easement? We'll figure out some compensation for that. Yeah? He says, yeah, sure. The power company is winning on that because that agreement binds all the future landowners on this. All the future owners cannot contest that. Why? Because the rights on the power line are above the land with the power line. Airspace. And that's the trick on that. So, a common example for an easement would be a power line, yeah, or a sewer line. Depends what type of easement you're looking at. Was there an easement question on the study guide? No. So how would you explain the form of an easement? Okay, don't want to coach you guys. Don't want to promise that easement question on the exam. No? But I want to spur up a little bit your flexibility in thinking. Easement. There are multiple types of easements. There are multiple examples of easements. If you're a property manager, you need to know if you have easements on your site. If FPL shows up with a work truck, you need to know if they actually have the access rights to that. Because somewhere on their site plans there's easements. If you want to move from property manager into development, if you look at a site plan, or survey plan, and you take a look and say, well, there's a 20-foot easement for the water management district. That means 20 feet of your property are not developable under the easement agreement. There might be a way that you bridge over a second floor, like balconies or not, but you can't build on those 20 foot. You gotta keep a corridor as access. Around the corner we did a project. 15 or 20 feet easement to access the watering canal, to clear out once a year the dirt and all that, or if it's flooding. Cannot develop. How do you price that? How do you deal with that? You might end up not buying the property because of all the regulations on it, aka easements. Okay? Alright, to finish that, there's also the idea of encroachments. Any idea about what an encroachment is? Think about your property ends here. This is your property. What do you mean? You put the fence like 10 feet further out. Nobody watching it. You keep that fence. You enjoy 10 more feet of your space. You're encroaching in someone else's property. Usually you would call a surveyor and figure out where the exact property lines are. It's really cool in old subdivisions when wood fences have been rebuilt after a storm, and suddenly, hey, the fence line moved by 5 feet. Lots of fun. Alright. I want to talk about takings. The cool stuff? Not going to be 9, but you're going to be before. Okay? She's like, yeah, get through this. Alright, takings. Let's do this in short. Don't need to have the whole legal text. Okay. When it comes to takings, the fundamental idea is that you have to differentiate between a so-called physical invasion of your property. I'm trying to merge now you as a private property owner and what you heard earlier about the governmental rights on policing and zoning. Okay? And then in between companies. Alright, physical invasion of property. What do you think could be a physical invasion of property?
Come in and take the property.
Yeah, we're talking about land. You just can't drive up with a weird van and pull in 10 acres of land and hijack it. So what could be a physical invasion of property?
Like, you, for example, have like cattle and you just put cattle on the random piece of land.
Yeah, how often do you see cattle in urbanized areas?
Not a lot, but you see it sometimes in baby and stuff. Baby inside this ranch.
I would expect deer a lot, some deer and other stuff in baby too. I used to live, again, I used to live in an area where you sit in the home office and suddenly you have like 3 deers in your front yard crossing the street. So, really cool. Physical invasion, cattle herd. It's not a common physical invasion, and it's so temporary where you could say, hey, the economic means and then later on the beneficial use of the property is probably not yet violated. Yeah? So what else? Physical invasion. Who did we not have? You have to be quiet today, so let's go with you.
So I'm guessing, for example, if somebody built into your like property lines,
That would be encroachment, we just covered that, and yes, that could be somewhat a physical invasion. And the question is, how do you actually remedy that with, or mitigate? That's usually fence lines. That's not really yet a Supreme Court case. Dana?
What about like illegal dumping of like certain products on those people's property?
Yeah, but it would be more like littering, environmental issues. It would be rather in negligence of, let's say, the health, welfare, and safety statutes in a city. So the city would go after that. You, as a private property owner, might not actually have to deal with that. You just call law enforcement and the city, and they probably investigate that. Or you call the health department. I had once a car breaking down in my driveway from weeks, and we ended up actually calling the health department because it started leaking oil. So the health department towed that car. Mean neighbors. It was my parking spot. Physical invasion, other examples. Diego.
One example of physical invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of them is I come from Antigua, and my dad owns a piece of land across from university, and a lot of times people who like decide they want to sell food across to the school decide to park on the land. Would that be invasion, or are you talking?
We would consider it trespassing, probably, in the context. Alright, so physical invasion is, what if you grant someone the right to use parts of your property already, and they are going to have someone else piggyback on you, on their company? So Loretto versus Teleprompter, Supreme Court case, stated actually in a book chapter, is a funny example because the city of New York mandated that all the property owners will allow the cable company to run cables and cable boxes to the homes and into the property. Property as in home, land, and or a condominium. And then apparently the tele company came up with the idea, hey, let's have another utility company just piggyback on that and ride with us. And they basically said, no, that is a physical invasion of property because one utility company was granted that right and the second one was using it. Like the first one wanted to help the second one. That's a standard case of physical invasion. Most of the cases we're going to take a look at today are all loss of beneficial use or the economic means of the property. Yes, please.
So what's the difference between physical invasion and infringement? Where do you draw that line of it's no longer infringement? Because isn't in the example that you used with the teleprompter that one's piggybacking off the offer, technically isn't the second one infringing like from the first, or am I just not?
No. They are not going that route to have a specific legal definition of infringement.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer. In the context of takings, we're particularly focusing on the context and the framework of zoning background. Where government is now involved in a physical invasion, aka potentially taking away your property rights or the use of your property. And we differentiate in this case, let's say, through physics, or the monetary value. The Supreme Court case Loretto versus Teleprompter, there might be some infringement riding along with that, but the idea is one company was granted that right, mandatory granted that right, a second company wanted to use that right and therefore violated that agreement. Infringement is a violation, but I don't want to mix different law frameworks. Okay? So, and then second we have the loss of beneficial use. To come back to that, I want to present you the other case of physical invasion in that context. So I have tons of notes, probably not on this one. To sum this up, this is the Cosby case, and Cosby is really funny because Cosby, funny in a sad way. Cosby argued that any time a military plane flies over his property, his chicken are scared. The legal text even describes very graphically how far those chickens are scared. To the death, as in going wild, injuring themselves, dying from going panic mode. Alright? So, you would argue, well, if there's a plane flying over, very loud plane, if there's a plane flying over, it's just chicken. Huh? Why is that going up to the Supreme Court? Well, what did we learn just a moment ago? There are two major types of takings. One is a physical invasion of your property, and two is a diminishing value of your economic means or potential economic means of that property. Huh? You also, as a resident, have the right to what? Defend your property, to cherish your property, to live on your property. Fourth Amendment, fourth and fifth. Yeah? That's the right to do so. So, let's call it, let's say, quality of life. A quality of life of a property owner also includes having animals. If your chicken are not happy, you are not happy. All right, short. The winner was the guy with the chicken. Huh? The takings must exhibit a direct and immediate interference with the enjoyment and use of land. You can't enjoy your land if your chicken are half dead in a chicken coop. A former chicken owner, I do appreciate the wealth and health of my chicken. Huh? And then Holding also said takings must be direct because of the reduction of value in land in question. Airport noise, certainly a reduction of the value. Yeah? But they actually meant here the enjoyment and use of the land as one of the main reasons to give that. Keep that short. These are the two really interesting cases. One is a cable box and an additional cable into that box as a physical invasion. And here, this is an early case in 46 about chicken coop not going nuts and deadly by military airline traffic. So next time you walk across campus and you have Spirit or Delta fly over campus, you remember that. At one moment, the flyover time, your enjoyment and the use of land is diminished. If you have that as a private property owner every damn day, then you have a problem. If you want to sell the house, make sure that the showing is not in high traffic, air traffic times. If you want to sell the home and you live in an area with seasons, you might want to make sure that you sell the home in June and not in September. First, better because of the school market, school district, and school starting. And second, in certain areas, they have different flight patterns in the brush for the airport close by. So you're sitting on your patio in September, airport, airport. You didn't have that when you bought the house in April. You saw the airplane circling around. Yeah? I have a friend who did that. Really fun. They actually called me and said, do you teach planning law? Is there something? And I was like, yeah, there's a chicken coop thing. And he's like, oh, damn it. Yeah? Do your due diligence. You know that there's an airport close by. Take a look at the overlay zoning of the approach of the airport. We learned today. There has to be an overlay zoning for noise control. Yeah? So every time you buy a house or you're considering to develop something, take a look on the environment stuff. It's all public knowledge now. All right. The other important cases. I put that up because it's a flooding case. It's not in the book. Just listen to the concept, how these cases are decided. Sanguinetti versus United States. It's old, 24. Yeah? So what they did is they built a canal, and every other time, seasonal, land of Sanguinetti was covered by flooding. Yeah? And ooh, government comes to destroy my land, flooding and all this. Yeah? And the issue here again is the property taking, is the physical invasion of the property existent. Maybe. Yeah? Is an economic diminishing effect on the means of the economic value present during the flooding. Think about it. We have a piece of land, say a classroom, half the classroom is flooded for the next 2 weeks. And then it's gone for a whole year. Is there physical invasion of your property? Okay. Is there diminishing economic means of the value of our property?
I think so.
Depends on what it is.
I think there's session in class because then you can't have class.
What's the catch? It's only for 2 weeks in that 1 year. And that's the reason why they said no. The harm to the property must be demonstrated directly or indirectly at a permanent way. If it just gets flooded for 6 weeks a year, this is something he can figure out. Same thing here. If we have a big thunderstorm coming, you're not going to sue the government or the city of Baby for bad stormwater runoff and the university drive is flooded by 5 inches. You've been in April, May at Whole Foods in a parking lot? You needed a submarine to get through that. Like 8 inches high, because they didn't clear out the gutters. So, indirect consequential harm cannot substantiate in a taking. To make this short, there are like 2 pages of notes in the backyard. On a presenter view that doesn't run here. So if it's just temporarily, it does not necessarily constitute a taking in both dimensions. It's bad, but it's not necessarily taking. Alright, the famous case. So about 1-ish decades after the city of New York designed actually their zoning codes defining lot sizes and other values, how they deal with zoning, these kind of guys came along. And basically what the city of Euclid had was they had different zones across properties. You can see here there are 3 different zones, transition zones on this piece of property. Yeah? Alright. So, and the claim was, Amber Realty claimed that they had a restriction imposed that they would actually have a 75% loss on the value on their property, causing a taking. That's one of the first times that they articulate the idea of, I have a invasion of my property at a economic terms, because the economic means on my property are now in different zones. I cannot fully enjoy the potential economic means on my property. Any guesses? Who won that case? The city that imposed different zones on their property for some reasons, or the private property owner who said, you are reducing actually my property value with these different zones because I can't build those densities anymore. I can't build the way I wanted to build. Euclidean zoning, does this ring a bell? City won. Yeah? A diminished value of the property is not necessarily taken. In that case, they ruled, or the whole holding, that yeah, you might lose some, but you're not losing all of it. So they went for fun reasons. They actually went into a legal room on that. However, they did that with a purpose, and the way the zoning was stated was a rational relation to the health, safety, and safety of the community. Remember those 3 prongs: health, welfare, and safety? That will come all the time and goes along the takings. And please forgive me, you only know this kind of sketch and a short presentation of the context. Yeah? You don't know the whole story. So what kind of U6 or U2 actually means. What you need to remember from this case is that the city was enabled to protect the public good, maintaining health and safety of the community, even though there was a somewhat reduction in the property value. It is not a taking. As a result of this, yeah? As a result of this, it was actually saying that the ordinance was permissible exercise of police powers, decided that Amber Realty Company did not lose all economic value. They still have money in there. It would be different if that would be property that got flooded completely by a dam. Like a whole valley is gone. No? The interesting take from this is since then we're talking about Euclidean zoning. Since then, we're talking that a zoning ordinance needs to be descriptive and as legal description for one parcel only, for one property and sets of parcels. So it's fairly uncommon. For the next 60 years, you will see only one zone on one property. Not anymore these transformation zones where you have the question, when and where exactly is this kind of corridor in existence? Yeah? So that changed the landscape of zoning. That also is a milestone when it comes to takings and in zoning ordinances. Alright, next one. Easy to remember. There are three famous cases, Nolan, Dolan, and Lucas. Time is actually Nolan, Lucas, and Dolan, but you can't remember that. Nolan, Dolan, Lucas. It's almost a line. Yeah? In short, Nolan was Nexus. In short, Nolan wanted to build a beach house here in California. Super example. Beach house, have property, want to build a beach house. Go to the city. Hey guys, I want to have a building permit. City says, great. You need to give us an easement for public access to the beach. Because it's a great sightseeing view there. You get the building permit, give us, if you grant us that easement for public access. What did we just learn about easements? They give a specific right to a person or utility company by the landowner for a specific use. So, concept of the easement? Sure, fine. Combination of grant and easement in order to get a building permit? To develop here your beach house? Anyone wants to have a shot in that argument? What constitutes a takings? It is physical invasion or a permanent diminished economic reduction of your means of value. Could be a physical invasion. So what they ruled here is actually Nolan 1. Because all the regulations and all the rules in the process need to be directly related to the process. AKA, yes, you can talk to those guys at City Hall and say, hey, you know what, I want to build this. How can we make arrangements? Part of the communication process is certainly to talk about excesses and all that. But at that time, he didn't like that and he sued the city, vice versa, and he got granted, actually, he won the case. Particular because it was in exchange for issuing the building permit to get that easement. Granted easement in exchange for the building permit. They need to be related. They came up actually what they call a so-called nexus requirement to test particular specific situations and setups for those conditions. The key takings away from this case, that's in the book, is all the actions need to be related to your own actions as well. The city cannot dictate you to grant an easement because they want to have the public access to the beach still. That needs to be in some other form. You just can't, you can't make that dependent on the outcome of your building permit. They could talk with you about it. But technically this is the case defining, oh no, he applied for a building permit, get him a building permit or not. But don't make that outcome dependent on other special deals. Yeah? Speaking of special deals, here we go, Mr. Lucas. Lucas is great too. Lucas is great because he bought the house in 1990. No, he bought it actually in 86, 2 years before they changed it. So this guy buys the house, yeah, making lots. Here, actually that's really the place. Buys the house, and then the Shoreline Act to protect the boundaries here, the sand beach and all that, of 77, they come up with the idea in 88, they move that shoreline. They moved that protection zone up the shore, creating a so-called no-build zone in 88. Great. So now you have 2 lots vacant in a no-build zone. What are you going to do if you want to actually really build that stuff? We contest that the change of that policy and that regulation to move that boundary up here was constitutional and was potentially a property takings. Not necessarily a physical invasion, but if you are not allowed anymore to build anything on that, not even a parking lot, that would constitute a takings in economic terms. Because your economic value of the property turned into nada, zero. Yeah. Okay? Makes sense. And he actually won. Yeah? So, Nolan, Lucas, no, we have Dolan. Make this short, these guys had a store, wanted to demolish the old one, wanted to rebuild on the same property a larger one, yeah? And the backyard of them is a creek, apparently with recreational value. And the city came up with the idea, you know what? We give you all the building permits you need if you grant us an easement for a bike path. Teddy's like, what, a bike path? Huh? So, he actually won that case. And I think he won that case because of 2 reasons. Because in '94, nobody really cared about bikers. At least not as publicly as now, depending where you're at. And it is a follow-up on the Nexus test we heard earlier with Dolan, and a follow-up with Lucas on how your private property is actually going to be taken away in economic means from you. They also said, okay, fine, it has to roughly proportional. That's legal terms. All right, what's the public good? Anyone, any idea? You do not have to have done those readings for the legal definition. What in your own words would be public good? Something for a community. Is a condominium tower public good?
No.
No. Is Central Park in Plantation public good?
Yes. Could be and could not.
Why could be, could not?
Because it takes up a lot of space that could be valuable, but if it's not valuable for that area, then it could be positive.
Okay, is the Everglades public good? Okay. Is the beach public good? Why is the beach public good?
Like a recreation.
It's like recreation, so Central Park and Plantation is no recreation? Yeah, so it's public good, could it? The Queen's here on campus, public good, isn't it? It's private space that is perceived and enjoyed as public good. So in theory, all green spaces and open spaces could be public good unless there's a no trespassing private property sign. Huh? Or beaches could be public good. Public good is also that you drink healthy water, clean air. Huh? All that EPA stuff could be public good. Again, who's responsible for maintaining public good? Some form of government. What's the rule of government? What they're doing in the context of zoning and zoning background? What are they taking care of? What are the 3 items that they're taking care of? Health, safety, and welfare. Alright? So that could be public good then. Health, safety, welfare. Yeah? So, public good could be under health, safety, and welfare, could be also the well-being of the city.